Good morning, everybody. The Committee on Finance is hereby called to order. The time of the morning is 10:04 a.m. on Monday, February 22nd, 2021. And pursuant to applicable law and my determination that attendance by remote means is necessary, because an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent due to the declared public health disaster caused by COVID-19, the meeting is conducted by video conference. So for questions during the meeting, I ask that Aldermen use the raise your hand function to indicate that they have a question, and members of the committee shall be given preference. If you wish to make a point of order, point of information, or point of clarification while one of your colleagues is speaking, please use that raise your hand function and unmute your microphone. We'll now have a roll call to establish quorum, so please unmute your mic when your name is called. Vice Chair Hairston.
Present.
Alderman Sawyer.
Here.
Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Harris.
Here.
Alderman Beal.
Yep.
Alderman Garza.
Here.
Alderman Thompson. Alderman Cardenas. Alderman Quinn.
Here.
Okay. Alderman Burke.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
I am present.
Thank you. Alderman Moore.
Present.
Alderman Curtis.
Here.
Alderman O'Shea.
Here.
Alderman Brookins. Alderman Brookins, was that a ding by? Okay. Alderman Tabaris.
Present.
Alderman Scott.
Present.
Alderman Burnett.
Here.
Alderman Irvin.
Present.
Alderman Taliaferro.
Here.
Alderman Raboris. I saw him up there. Chairman Wagspack's present. Alderman Austin.
Here.
Present. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz.
Present.
Alderman Sposato.
Nick Sposato is here.
Alderman Napolitano.
Present.
Alderman Riley.
Present.
Alderman Smith.
Present.
Alderman Tunney.
Present.
Alderman Osterman.
Present.
Alderman Silverstein.
Present.
Thank you. And I had Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Thompson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm having some trouble with my technology.
Okay. I'll watch it during the meeting. Alderman Cardenas. Alderman Brookins. Alderman Raboris. Alderman Villegas. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum. We have 30 members present. Thank you.
Alderman Cardona is present.
Thank you, Alderman Cardona. Let me just check here and see. Make sure I know there's some other folks on here that might not have been able to get their mics set. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we have a quorum with 30 members present. You should have in front of you the meetings of the minutes per Rule 45 of the January Committee on Finance meeting. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the Rule 45?
Move to pass, Chairman. Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Lopez has a motion to pass. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. And that was Alderman Lopez. That was a motion to approve using the roll call used to establish quorum. So thank you for that motion.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. That was my mistake. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to move to item 2. This is a communication concerning the approval of the First Amendment to the original ordinance revising the City of Joliet Water Supply Preliminary Agreement and establishing an advisory council on Lake Michigan water supply agreements. We're going to be joined by CFO Jenny Bennett for testimony on this matter. After she gives her testimony, we can take questions. And let me make sure she is set to go there. CFO Bennett, are you ready?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, and before you, just before you start, I'm sorry, everyone should have the documents, the agenda, and the supplemental agenda sent about 20 minutes before the meeting, so if you're looking for it, it is there. But with that, CFO
Point of
Bennett.
information, Chairman.
Alderman Moore, yes.
Just for the record, we didn't have any public speakers, correct?
Thank you, that is correct. We had no public speakers for this meeting today. Thank you. CFO Bennett.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Wagasback, Vice Chairwoman Hairston, members of the Committee on Finance, and members of the City Council. As you may recall, the City Council approved in December of 2020 a preliminary water supply agreement which laid out terms for the provision of water to the City of Joliet. Since then, the City of Joliet and the City of Chicago have negotiated further terms which paved the way for the City of Joliet to select Chicago to be its future water supplier at its meeting on January 28, 2021. The ordinance before you today, entitled First Amendment to Original Ordinance Revising the City of Joliet Water Supply Preliminary Agreement and Establishing Advisory Council regarding Lake Michigan water supply agreements, would authorize the following. First, the agreement negotiates a water rate cap, which further limits annual increases in Joliet's American Water Works Association, or AWWA, water rate to the lesser of, first, CPI with a consideration to a 10-year cumulative look back on CPI, and two, a 5% growth rate. This lesser of CPI and 5% rate cap is already provided to all of our existing regional wholesale water partners. Second, the term of the agreement will be extended to 100 years. Joliet will have the right to terminate as well as renegotiate terms of the contract within 50 years. This agreement was made in large part because Joliet will be paying for the entirety of the 600 to 800 million in additional infrastructure needed upfront. Third, the agreement establishes additional specificity around the advisory council functions, which were previously agreed to, but now memorialized within the contract. These include a requirement to hold meetings quarterly and to report advisory council recommendations to City Council. As you may recall, establishing a regional water advisory council made up of the city's wholesale water customers has always been a part of the agreement, and these additions reinforce ongoing transparent communication efforts and our commitment to regional collaboration with all of our water partners. The City of Joliet's selection of the City of Chicago is a significant first step to creating a stronger and more collaborative regional water supply landscape. The City of Joliet is the third to fourth largest city in the state and allows us to increase the likelihood of providing water to more customers. Under the revised agreement before you today, Joliet will generate between 24 to 37 million in water revenues annually beginning in 2030 and approximately 1 billion of present value to the city over 100 years. These are new revenues to the system with no upfront investment in infrastructure paid for by the City of Chicago. Joliet will pay for the entire 600 to 800 million of additional infrastructure needed to connect to the system. Moreover, the AWWA rate methodology is anticipated to have a net neutral financial impact on city residents while providing more transparency of rates to the region. As mentioned earlier, the City of Joliet will generate 24 to 37 million in new revenues. Overall, we expect the rate to be very similar, but with the added benefit of a stronger regional water supply landscape that will further help the City of Chicago compete for future contracts. I would again like to thank you and all of your partnership in securing this agreement with Joliet, which will benefit generations of Chicagoans to come. With that, I'll turn the conversation back to Chairman Wagasback, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, CFO Bennett. Okay, if there's any questions, please use the raise your hand function. And first up is Chairwoman Dowell.
Thank you, Chairman. Jenny, I want to congratulate you and your team for getting this through the pipeline, so to speak. I wanted to ask, does the city retain, you mentioned that we extended the terms of the agreement to 100 years and that Joliet has an opt-out provision. does the city retain any rights to opt out?
So we have the right at 50 years to mutually agree upon any changed terms to the agreement. As it relates to termination right, it is a Joliet right to terminate, and that's in large part because the city of Joliet is agreeing to pay for the entirety of the fairly large infrastructure improvements that are necessary. And as a result of that, the termination right lies with Joliet.
Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairwoman Dell. Alderman O'Shea.
Thank you, Chairman. Jenny, I would just like to congratulate you and Acting Commissioner Chang. How close we came to losing to Hammond. I mean, this literally came down to the wire a week out. This was Hammond, Indiana's contract to win. And I know how hard you and your team worked on this. And although you're going to be humble, I think everybody should know what incredible work was put into this and how important this is to the future. As not only are we connecting Joliet, but possibly opening the door for more expansion into the western suburbs and southwest suburbs. Just want to congratulate you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quickly, water rates. We talked about the did you say AWPA or AWWA rate setting? Can someone break that down to us in layman's terms, number one? And what does that mean for customers, our residents in the city of Chicago?
Sure. So the AWWA rate at its most basic level is in essence cost of service. So whatever it costs us to provide that service to our regional water partners is what we'll charge them. The calculation goes through an extensive analysis around how much it costs to take the water in at the crib, to purify the water at the treatment plant, to transmit that water through the tunnel to the connection point, at which point Joliet then takes ownership, which is the point of demarcation. And so we, as a part of this AWWA analysis, calculate what that cost is for every customer and then charge them that rate. It's a methodology that has in essence a whole manual that goes with it, and that is what a lot of other water utilities use to charge water rates to other customers. Based on our initial analysis around this, we expect for the AWWA rate to be approximately where it is that we're currently charging water rates to our wholesale partners. If anything, we expect it to improve upon our ability to finance our upcoming needs because of the fact that Joliet is net new revenues to our system. So the $24 to $37 million of new revenues we expect to help support what in essence is fixed infrastructure costs that we currently have and capacity that we have, but sharing that cost now amongst a broader set of water partners.
Let me ask this question. Would Chicago residents expect to pay more or less than what Joliet is paying once we invoice them for water, once it leaves our system and goes transferred over to them?
Sure. By the time the water gets to Joliet, in particular with the new infrastructure that Joliet has to build, I would say that it's very likely that the Joliet rates will end up being higher than the city of Chicago rates, largely just by way of the fact that there's a longer distance to travel from Lake Michigan to Joliet. So that's.
So I fully expect that people in Joliet are going to pay a higher rate than residents in Chicago. My question is, the rate that Joliet pays to the city of Chicago, will that be more or less than what our residents pay? Meaning that once the water leaves us, they pay us. We've got a meter at that park somewhere out south in Derek's ward. That's where the meter is, right? And that's where they pay from. Now, I understand their transmission costs downstream, of course, are higher because they got to deal with their infrastructure and everything else. But my question is, what are they paying at the meter versus what residents in the city of Chicago will be paying at the meter?
Sure. So the cost of transmitting water for our retail customers is more than what it is that we need to transmit water to Joliet. So for example, the entirety of all the water mains and all of the, various pipeline that is needed to get the water to our homes, that's a cost that we ultimately have to bear as retail residents. In addition to that, we all know that there are, pending liabilities coming down the pipeline, like, for example, lead service lines, which we're working, to try to resolve. So as it relates to the, rate that's paid, there are going to be variances, and, how that rate compares really depends on who you are as a customer, and each customer will be different based on their actual cost of service. I think importantly, when we think about who pays what rate, because the water system is fixed infrastructure, and because that infrastructure, in essence, has a lot of capacity at this point, really it's about how we share that cost amongst more customers. So whatever rate it is that you're paying, what we want is to bring in as many customers as we can to try to share in those costs, which then helps to reduce costs for our customers.
You still didn't answer my question. So are we going to be paying, are my constituents going to be paying more or less for water than Joliet because everybody's paying the same rate today?
It's hard. I couldn't tell you exactly what rate's going to get paid because we haven't calculated AWWA in 2030. But more importantly, I think the appropriate rate to compare is what a Joliet retail customer pays versus what our customers pay.
Well, I don't think that's an apples to apples comparison because they're 50 miles away and they got to pay greater transmission costs than anyone. I mean, they may be paying rates, Harvey or Maywood rates. I mean, because of internal issues. So my question is, how is this going to impact the residents here in the city of Chicago? And rate is important. I mean, we've seen our water rates increase over time in the past, and people want to understand that. And so I think it's only fair that we understand how others are being charged in the system that we're all, sharing in. I understand we want to spread that fixed cost out amongst other people. But again, how does that impact our residents here in the city of Chicago? Are we going to see lower rates because now we're spreading that cost amongst many people? Or are we going to see our rates increase?
Yeah.
In comparison to what other people are paying? That's all we really want to understand.
Yeah. So Alderman, if your question is how will this transaction impact rates of our customers, it will benefit the rates on our customers. That's a true statement because, like I said, we're sharing more of these costs now with a broader set of customers. If you're asking if the particular rate that we pay, is going to be higher or lower than the wholesale rate that's sold, which I don't think is an apples to apples comparison, because we also have to pay for our own water distribution costs, which aren't included in that. So, I think that ultimately that question is very different than how will this transaction impact our customers. And I can say
why aren't our water distribution costs included in our rate?
They are.
Okay, but you just said what you just said didn't quite look at it that way. I just think that we just need to understand what are we paying and what are they paying. And I would hope that our residents will get the same or a better deal than people that are not in our community. Now, if we want to turn this into something else, then that's a different conversation. But my understanding is that we're trying to run an operation that's going to pay for itself. We're not trying to sell water to make a profit. We're just trying to pay for itself. Now, if that's the business that we want to go into, that's a different conversation. And it's never been approached to me in that way. So I just want to understand that will the residents of the city of Chicago, and there's some greater benefit in doing this. And we made some changes to make this a 100-year deal. We talked about some other things. I just don't want our residents to lose out and pay higher rates subsidizing something else. That's
right.
all.
And I think to that point, this transaction will not do that. It's if what our residents have to pay right now and the impact of adding Joliet to our system will not, cause for them to be subsidizing Joliet.
Okay, and that means that we should be at or at a better rate than what they're paying in most people's minds. So if that's what you're telling us, then I can understand that. So
Yeah, so I'm not saying that their rates will be lower than the wholesale rate charged by, to the city, but what I am saying is that their rate would have been higher had it not been for this transaction.
so they're going to end up paying lower water rates than our residents, is what you're telling me.
A Joliet resident in the city of Joliet, we don't expect will be paying a lower rate than our resident.
I didn't ask you about a Joliet resident because they got a whole bunch of other issues. I'm asking you that meter, if I take the bill from that meter in the park out there in Derek Curtis's ward and hold it up next to Miss Jones's bill, will the rates be the same or be better or less? That's what I think we want to understand.
Right. It's very likely that that rate will be lower, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. And I think that, it misses the fact that the rate that gets charged to Joliet doesn't include any distribution whatsoever. Other than the tunnel.
That's totally different than where we are today. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a different rate setting methodology.
We pay the same rate that our wholesalers pay. Everybody pays the same rate, right? And so we're switching that methodology for them. And so I think that needs to be a part of a broader conversation so we understand how this will impact our residents, because there will be different rates being paid at different points in time.
Right. So as a result of the change in methodology, we project that the rates that the city residents will pay will be lower as a result of this transaction. It's $24 to $37 million of new revenues to the system. Joliet will be somewhere between the second to fourth largest water customer in our system. It is the third or fourth largest city in the state of Illinois. And it is roundly about $1 billion of new value to the city's water system.
Well, through the chair, could you all just project out what Ms. Jones is going to pay and what our other customers are going to pay, the large wholesale customers, be it the South Water Commission, the DuPage Water Commission, what everybody will be paying, so we can have a clear understanding under this new methodology, how this will look and how our residents will benefit from these transactions.
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay, thank you much.
Sure. And, this came up in the briefings as well. There is public information out there that shows exactly what all those municipalities that have been studied are paying already. Many of them are much higher than Chicago as it exists today. And you can kind of go through several, like the Northeastern Illinois water dashboards. A lot of those pinpoint exactly how much they're paying right now. Joliet, for instance, paying more than our consumers are. And by 2030, I don't think it projects it for that, but it'll definitely be more because they are, they're going to be subsidizing, or not subsidizing, they're going to be supplying water to several other municipalities out there, but the price is only going to continue to go up for them out there.
Well, that's true.
I think ours is stable.
Right. I think the difference in that is the apples to apples comparison is that what are they paying us, not what they're paying their specific municipality, because there are an additional infrastructure and transmission costs and treatment costs go in at, for example, the village of Maywood's cost of doing water is included in their rate, but what they pay us is totally different. So I'm just trying to understand what they're paying the city of Chicago, not what their overall rate is. What are we charging them per 1,000 cubic feet versus what we're charging all residents per 1,000 cubic feet? That's what I want to try to understand versus the DuPage Water Commission, what we're doing out south with Harvey, what we will be doing with Joliet, what our 10 largest customers versus what our residents are paying. That's what I want to understand and get us to focus on that, not what they're paying at the tap in DuPage, but what they're paying at the meter in Chicago.
And Chairman, if I may, let me try maybe a different, way of responding to your question, Alderman. If we end up charging our wholesale water partners more than what it costs to provide them the service, they will go elsewhere. And if they go elsewhere, that will cost our customers more by way of rate. And that has already happened. We've had, call it a half a dozen or so customers already leave our system in the last half a decade or more. And if we're not providing them with ultimately a fair rate, they will look to other sources, as did Joliet during this process. And so this is about charging, the cost of service, and the cost of service for us to take this water to the connection point. Everything else Joliet will be responsible for, and ultimately creating better transparency around that rate setting.
I have no objection to that. I just need to understand what it looks like for our residents versus what we're charging everybody else. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Sposato.
Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I'm
I
not
don't really
muted
have
there.
any, I don't really have any questions. I just have a comment. Jenny, I'm sure you're a big part of this. I'm sure many people were, so I don't know who to thank. So since you're on the call, I'm going to thank you for doing a great job. Unlike some, I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, but some money makers that didn't actually make us money in the past that cost us money. This is going to be just the opposite. So I'm sure it'll be a few bucks in our pocket every year for years to come. And I appreciate that. And I think it's huge for our city. I don't know how huge, but time will tell. And, I understand what you were just saying also. We don't want to trip over dollars to save nickels. So sometimes it takes money to make money. So I just basically think that's going to be huge for us. So good job to you and your team, or whatever the team is, on accomplishing this and coming up with a right price for Joliet to meet to bring them aboard. So great job. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Alderman Raymond Lopez, and then Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Give me, I was muted. Thank you, Nick, dollars for nickels. Awesome. I just wanted to ask a question. How much do our current customers, how much are they in arrears to us last year, as well as how are we looking this year so far?
It's roundly, if I recall correctly, I'll have to double check this and get this to confirm it through the chair, but about 20 or so.
Best guess. That's how much from all of last year?
It's the total amount of, not just from last year, but the total amount of amounts owed to the city.
So roughly, and I understand best guess, how much do we not collect from our municipal partners?
How much do we not collect annually? Or in
Yes.
total? The number that I mentioned is roundly about how much it is that we're owed by our regional water partners.
Every year?
Not every.
So then this
total.
new customer. Sorry, I'm just trying to answer.
Go ahead, Alderman.
With Joliet. Thank you. I'm just trying to ascertain, Joliet being our newest customer, this will obviously offset some of the losses that we're seeing in other areas and continue to see from other municipalities. How much of that new funding is necessary to secure some of the financial obligations that you referenced earlier?
In terms of amounts owed? So it's all money that ends up going to the water system and the Water Enterprise Fund, and will help to support water operations. As it relates to the amounts owed from our other partners, what it does do is it helps to solidify the regional competitive landscape, so that we're all working together towards a Chicago water supply solution. In particular, had Joliet selected Hammond through this process with the pipeline that went across our southern border, in essence, what it does is it destabilizes that landscape. And so the selection of the city by Joliet helps us to, further solidify the city of Chicago as a water source for many, and allows us to remain competitive in that water supply.
How many other municipalities have the ability to use Lake Michigan as a water source for sale?
Mhm.
Illinois.
So it's largely in the northeastern Illinois region. There's a water allocation that's
Obviously.
provided for by the Great Lakes Compact. And that water allocation, which is decided upon by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, limits our ability in terms of how far we can reach. Having said that, there is allocation available, and as a result of some of the work that's been done in the past around water conservation, et cetera, there is enough allocation now to be able to extend a bit further west and south to Joliet, potentially others. It's ultimately under the purview of IDNR in terms of ability to extend the reach of water supply.
Then lastly, Chairman, the reason I bring this up is because like so many businesses, sometimes you have the ability to buy out or merge with some of your competitors. So my final question would be, are we looking at trying to do something similar, either buying out other municipalities or merging with them in terms of this distribution so that we can hopefully gain a stronger footprint in terms of being able to sell water throughout our region? Is that something that we're looking at or possible?
I don't know that we're looking at buying or merging, which I think would be, a pretty big idea. I know that many of our regional partners like to have their own ability to govern water policy in their region. It was actually a fairly, important point in our conversations with Joliet. What we do want, though, to your point, Alderman, is to be able to strengthen our ability and competitiveness in providing that water supply. And it's not just a city of Chicago, position where we want to supply more water to folks, but it's also, about how we can be more efficient about the infrastructure needed to provide that water. So we're not duplicating efforts by creating, repetitive infrastructure that ultimately isn't as sufficient. So I think that, it's largely more just, creating better collaboration. I think the advisory council is intended to do that, where we can come together as a region to talk about water policy issues and try to, support and encourage that kind of transparency and collaboration for the betterment of water policy more broadly.
Awesome. Thank you, Chairman. And again, congratulations. I know it was a lot of work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Smith.
Thank you. I just have a short question directed at Alderman Irvin's concern about constituents wondering whether they're paying fair rates. I suppose that if Mrs. Smith wanted to build my own water infrastructure and pipes and pumping stations, my rates could be compared to the bill I pay could be compared to our own rates and that of what that Joliet consumer is going to pay. Because the water itself is allocated to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as a free resource, but we are drawing from Lake Michigan but we have to maintain the gigantic water purification plants and all those things. And my understanding is that our water purification plants, thanks a lot to conservation, are what? At what capacity are our water purification plants today?
They're at basically about half, well, in particular, Sawyer is at half capacity. And I know Commissioner Chen is also on, who could speak to this more than I. But we have a fair bit of capacity.
Yeah, thank goodness. Water is our most precious resource in this coming age. And it seems as though if we can help cover some of the costs of maintaining these giant water purification plants by having another customer, it's just good business. So I'm hearing from what you're saying that is really the advantage of this deal to Chicago, that they're paying another, what is it, $60 million? I can't remember. A
24
huge
to 37. Yeah.
No, what they're paying for their pipes.
Oh, right. 600 to 800 million.
$600 to $800 million that we're not spending. I mean, not that we would, but that we're not spending. But at the same time, the money that we're making is helping to offset some of the costs of running those huge plants that today are running at half capacity. That's just, in any industry, you would call that just a marginal increase, a marginal revenue increase to us with a very minimal cost of capital, if any. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify that for myself, because maybe people don't understand that we really do have this incredible capacity to sell to others. And not only is it the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. And to Mr. Lopez's point, in a way, by us continuing to supply water to places that are that don't hurt our residents, that cover some of our costs, we are in a way creating a regional water supply, water process that we are all really responsible, that we all really should be aligned around for the health of our region. So I don't have any other questions, Chairman. Thank you. This is a really, really great deal. Thank you very much.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Irvin, yes.
To the previous
Sure.
point, the point here is this: if somebody's getting a big discount, our residents should also have that discount. And I think that we need to understand what that looks like, and so that our residents will understand if someone is getting a better deal than they are. Our residents help build the system, and for them to not see the benefit of that, I understand we want to spread the cost out amongst others, but we should not be giving another municipality a better deal than we're giving our own residents.
I don't believe we are.
So I just want you to understand that. So if you want your residents to pay higher than what we're selling it for, that's on you. But I want residents on the west side of Chicago to get the best deal possible for the water that they're purchasing, because these rates have continued to go up, and we've all been part of that conversation. Again, if somebody's getting a better rate, then we want that same rate for our folks as well.
Alderman, if I could, Alderman Smith, Alderman Irvin, we did have a vote on raising those rates, so I supported
it because of infrastructure needs. But again, if we're going to help somebody, we need to help our residents too.
Right, and based on what I've surmised from this whole Joliet case, that is a good point. I think that's what the CFO has tried to lay out for us here, but she will provide information through the chair that she has available.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you,
Alderman Smith, did you want to wrap?
No,
okay.
Thank you. No, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman, before I move on, Alderman Cardenas and Alderman Mitchell, would you like to be recorded as present for purposes of quorum?
Absolutely. And I also had a question.
Absolutely. Alderman Mitchell.
Okay. And Alderman Cardenas, you were up, and then Alderman Osterman.
Thank you. I'm going to try to kind of hone in on the conversation in terms of water rates, and we may get back and forth on it, but the water rates are reflective of the deal and the fact that they're building their infrastructure, so that's not a cost to the city. So if I'm pricing something out and I don't have to pay for that, I'm probably going to give you a better deal, a better rate, because it's costing me less to sort of put this together. Versus the city, what happened in the city is that we were building the infrastructure. So the billing or the pricing sort of mirror that. In fact, that we're raising the rates to be able to pay for the infrastructure that those people are going to benefit from, like the water main improvements and all that stuff that our residents are getting. That's not the case for Joliet. Am I correct?
That's correct. Yes, Alderman.
Okay. And so that's why it's important to understand it's not that our residents are getting opposed, for lack of a better term. It's just the fact that the pricing is different and the deal is different in terms of what this means. Now, another question for you. And I've heard it from other colleagues and people commenting on the fact that people are not paying the water that we're providing to some of the suburbs. That's a liability to them. That's a receivable to you. But that doesn't go away. The fact that they can't pay it now, it doesn't mean it disappears. It doesn't mean it's a loss to the city. Can you sort of explain that?
Sure. So as it relates to the amounts owed to the city, it's an amount we continue to pursue. We did just recently enter into an intercept agreement with Harvey, for example, where now they are now directing funds directly into our bank account and helping to support their payments. And we're, making efforts to try to work with our customers who owe us to make up on their backlog of amounts owed to us. So.
Right. And to be clear, this is not a loss to the city. There's nothing being lost here. You are recovering those funds. You're going to continue to recover the funds. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, you book it as a receivable. It's something that someone owes you. Unless you can recover, then you say it's a complete loss. Are we there yet?
No, not yet.
Thank you.
And we're going to continue to pursue that.
Thank you. And I just want to congratulate you. I know you and I talked about this deal. This is an anti-privatization deal, I call it. There was years ago, people talked about that we were shopping our water facilities to be privatized. Mm-hmm. This is what you do when you're sending a message that you're not privatizing. On the contrary, you're taking advantage of an asset that is obviously not fully in capacity, fully utilized to your advantage, and with obviously opportunity for growth to the benefits of taxpayers of Chicago. So I want to congratulate you on that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Osterman, 1 second. I have Alderman Raboris. Would you like to be recorded as present for purposes of quorum? Alderman. He's present. Okay, Alderman Osterman, please.
He sounds like he's underwater. Anyway.
Snow, ice.
Yes. Real quick question, Ms. Ben, I appreciate your leadership on this. Just for clarity's sake, moving forward, the amount of water that we are able to sell is not infinite, meaning that there are checks and balances with the state of Illinois and those other Midwest states. So, and I just asked this, or I put it out there so that my colleagues, all of us kind of understand that despite the high lake levels and things like that, our ability to do this moving forward is not infinitum. So that's correct.
Yes, that's correct. The IDNR regulates the allocation of water very closely, and they also take into account population projections that are provided for largely by MPC. But to your point, we continue to pursue conservation efforts, as does the entire region. One of the things that Joliet will have to do in order to secure its IDNR allocation is make investments in reducing water loss to below 10%, which is the IDNR's threshold for conservation to receive allocation. So a lot of effort is being undertaken to continue that.
And similarly with the state of Illinois, we're in a pact with other Midwest states around the Great Lakes and Canada. So I think that's monitored as well, kind of moving forward. So yeah. I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So as we look to the future, that we understand kind of the limits on our ability to do this. But otherwise, great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman. And CFO Bennett, I want to say thank you also. I think this has been a good exercise in really trying to get the aldermen more involved through multiple briefings and hearings on this, and I hope that continues as we move forward with this preliminary deal or preliminary agreement. I think it says a lot about the way we're trying to put these out in the public a little bit more than we've seen in the past, keep them transparent. But I would say, if we can get that information through the chair to Alderman Irvin, to his question, and to all the aldermen, that would be helpful. And also, let's see, I think we had covered most of the other bases on that. So unless there's no further questions, I have a motion for approval from Alderman Curtis for the same roll call used to establish quorum. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion carries. And thank you very much, CFO Bennett. Hopefully you can stick around for, I think, the next item that we have up as well,
Great.
just in case we need you there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, moving on to item number 3. This is a communication recommending the approval of the designation of the 2021 municipal depositories for the city of Chicago. We will be joined by Comptroller Sony for testimony on this matter. And so please, if you have questions, use the raise your hand function. She is going to give us a brief overview of this item, and then we will take questions. Comptroller, thanks for being here today. Are you ready?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I also
There you
have Jimmy McDonald from the Law Department, as well as Craig Slack from the Treasurer's Office as well.
Okay, when you're ready, why don't you give us an overview of
Yes.
the item? Thank you.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairman Wagasback, Vice Chairman Hairston, and members of the Finance Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss the list of municipal depositories that has been submitted for your approval. According to the Municipal Code, the Department of Finance is required to issue an RFP for municipal depositories on an annual basis and present the list to City Council for approval. In 2020, the department, along with the Treasurer's Office, issued the RFP in mid-September, including advertising the RFP in a local newspaper. To ensure that local banks were aware of the RFP issuance, the Department of Finance and Treasurer's Office directly contacted 54 banking institutions to inform them that the RFP had been issued. The RFP was out for 6 weeks, and the following 13 banking institutions responded: Amalgamated Bank of Chicago, Associated Bank NA, Bank of America National Association, BMO Harris Bank NA, Citibank NA, Fifth Third Bank National Association, GN Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank NA, MUFG Union Bank NA, PNC Bank National Association, the Huntington National Bank, Wells Fargo Bank NA, and Zions Bank Corporation National Association. The RFP submissions were received by the Department of Finance, City Treasurer's Office, and Law for the EDS requirements. The Department and the Treasurer's Office are committed to creating opportunities for small local banking institutions, particularly those owned by women and minorities. In the current interest rate environment, where the federal interest rate is 0%, and due to the liquidity of the city's accounts, however, it is not financially feasible for many smaller banking institutions to become a municipal depository at this time. For smaller banks to be able to cover their costs, they would need to charge the city an interest rate, which would not be desirable. For example, although the city may have $200 million of cash in an account, the city would need ready access to that cash to make payroll and pay for operating costs, which would mean that the cash would need to be highly liquid. As a result, smaller banks would not be able to invest and earn a return on that cash. If interest rates do increase to a level that is beneficial for smaller banks to do business with the city, we do have the ability to issue a new RFP so that those banks have the opportunity to participate. I would like to thank you for all your time this morning and your continued partnership. With that, I'll turn it back to Chairman Wagasback, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Comptroller. I know we had some good questions in the briefing, so are there any questions here today that anyone would like to speak to? Alderman Osterman.
Thank you. Controller, I appreciate you reaching out to me over the weekend about the issue. And I think for my colleagues, I think I appreciate how we went through this process with the RFP. My concern is, I think, an issue related to some of the bigger lenders and their track record and history in lending in mortgages in communities in the South and West Side. As the chairman of the Housing and Real Estate Committee, I've got a committee hearing this Friday with housing advocates, with the city treasurer, with the state treasurer. Representative Chuy Garcia is going to join us at the federal level, but my concern is that we've invited many of these big lenders to come to this hearing to really look at an important issue facing Chicago when it comes to the ability for African American, Hispanic residents to be able to get a mortgage loan on their house or to buy a house or a condominium. And I think there have been some really tragic situations where there's been a huge disparity in lending that's been highlighted in recent studies. We're going to talk about that at the hearing. And to date, many of these big lenders that are on the list of the depositories today are going to have shown a reluctance to join us and participate in the hearing, but more importantly, help work on solving this issue moving forward. So I'm going to be recorded as not voting today. I appreciate your willingness to help me get some of these lenders to this hearing. I want to thank my colleagues, Chairman Irvin, Sophia King, the chairman of the Progressive Caucus, and Alderman Maldonado, the chairman of the Latino Caucus, for all signing a letter, as well as Chairman Wagsback, who has encouraged some of these lenders to go there. But I think this is a broader issue that I think we as the council have to look at kind of year round. Time and again, through the Finance Committee, we are using city funds, and time and again, many of these institutions have not shown their support of Chicago communities who need it the most. And I think when we talk about equitable investment, it goes beyond government funds. It goes into other lending that can help communities and lift up communities. So I appreciate you working with me on this, and I hope that you will continue to help get some of these folks there. But for me today, I'm not going to be voting on this, and I think it's something we as a council have to continue to look at.
Thanks, Chairman Osterman, and I agree. When we spoke about this, I have a letter that will be going out as well to the lenders from the Committee on Finance. It will be urging them, as I am urging them right now, if they're on this call or listening in, that they attend that meeting on Friday to hear the sentiment of the City Council and the public on these this long history of issues that have kind of plagued our city and cities throughout the United States. And I think it's important they hear what the sentiment is, that they listen, at least on Friday, show up and listen to make choices in the future that I think will help everyone across the board and create more equity. So I'm glad that you reached out to me on that, and I'll be joining, obviously on the committee, but joining in that push to make sure that if we're going to be using these lenders and they are to profit even in small amounts for what they normally make, I think it's important that they show up. So with that, I will hand it off to Alderman Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jenny, I'm sorry, Rishma, in reaching out to some of the larger banks, did any of the smaller neighborhood banks apply or answer to the RFP?
Alderman Austin, the smaller banks that actually responded back were the banks such as MUFG Bank, then we have Amalgamated Bank, which is local, GN Bank, which is local as well. The other banks we reached out to, we actually proactively called them, emailed them, and let them know, but those banks did not respond.
And I didn't hear, out of the banks that you did mention, I didn't hear Chase.
JP Morgan Chase, they did apply.
Okay, all right, very good. I asked because I have a Chase in my area, as well as Fifth Third. So maybe I was too busy on the phone to hear those names, but I'm glad to know that some of the neighborhood banks have responded as well. Thank you so very much, Richmond. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And just to reiterate, the comptroller sent a letter December 10th that had that full list. So if you wanted to check your email, it should be there from December 10th, and we can resend it just so you have it in your files. Alderman Irvin, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, thank you, Reshma, for reaching out on this RFP in the just, I guess, really low numbers of responses. I do understand why, with the interest rate environment, what is it that we can do, in your opinion, to help spur more responses, more lending, utilizing the resources that we have and the power of the deposits that we can place with these institutions?
Thank you, Alderman Irvin. So I think to that point, being in the situation that we're currently in, and not only us as a city, but just with the fact with the pandemic going on, probably in the short term, meaning in the next 2 to 3 months, the balances that we have are pretty highly liquid. I think as we get to a point that we start getting more stabilized and we see things coming back more to normal in the coming, hopefully 6 to 8 months, at that point in time, we might have the ability to tell, I think, these smaller banks that not necessarily they need to hold large sums of cash, but whatever that they are able to hold as interest rates are going up, we can be able to maybe provide some more stability for them in terms of like holding on to cash a bit longer, or making it such that they know that they have more of an ability to invest and earn interest if the cash is being held longer with them. I know that this is probably more of the Treasurer's Office than what we do, but I know that's something that we engage with the Treasurer's Office on a regular basis to see, how liquid is the cash, how quickly do we need it, when do we need to spend. And as we see cash balances getting better, hopefully in the next few months, we can advertise that out more to those smaller banks. I think a lot of the smaller banks might feel like, oh, if we have to do business with the city, it has to be a large amount. And, we have to have cash available at any time. And although that might be the situation currently, things will get better, and we can get that message out to them if we can. That would probably be more encouraging for them to participate.
So you believe this to be more or less a temporary situation based on the current state of the economy, based on our cash needs, but down the road, this is something we definitely could change and deal with in a different manner.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the other things that although we do the RFP process in September, let's say if interest rates did start to go up, and I personally don't think that they would be going up anytime soon, but let's say, for whatever good luck that we have that it started to go up in the next few months, we always have the ability to go out with that RFP again and reach out to those banks and let them know that there's this opportunity. I think, we as a city have many different municipal depositories that we do. Of course, the larger accounts are there to pay payroll or regular bills, but we have lockbox accounts. We have accounts that we set up for specific grants or specific money that's coming in that can only be used for a certain purpose. And those are smaller, smaller accounts that might be easier for smaller banks to start getting into and growing from that perspective. So it's not that every bank needs to carry a large amount. I think as we get the word out and things get better, hopefully they'll be willing to participate more.
Okay, thank you much. So as our situation improves, hopefully we can put a little more money on the street to help spur the type of development I think that Chairman Osterman and Chairman Austin were speaking of. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Alderman King, are you there? Yes, Alderman King, and then Alderman Laspada.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. Comptroller, thank you again, for reaching out as well. Just a quick question following up on Alderman Irvin's question. So how often do we approve banks in this manner? Is this a yearly, 5-year, every couple of years?
We're required to do the RFP every year, and then it
Okay.
comes to the committee, and then the committee approves. So from my understanding that the RFP has been done every year, but the approval we haven't done in the last few years. So, but we do have the ability of coming every year and doing this, and even doing it earlier in the year. So if we feel that there's potential out there that we don't see currently, we can go out, in June or July and do another RFP. It usually takes from the time that we start to the time that the results come out, it's about 2.5 to 3 months. We do want to allow banks to have enough time to respond back, because there are some federal requirements that they need to meet in those responses. But from that process, I would say about 3 months.
Yeah, because I do understand the interest rates and how it might not be attractive to smaller banks who can't, probably float, that much during this time period. But could they apply, perhaps be on the list for when we have perhaps more attractive interest rates?
Absolutely. And I think that's the other message too, that we once a bank is approved, right? They apply, they meet the criteria, so they're approved by finance committee and by council. Then the relationship that the treasurer's office has is obviously a partnership one. So if they contact a bank and say this is what we want to set up, and the bank is not able to do it for that specific case, they can say that this is not something that we're able to do, but please let us know about future opportunities. So they're not forced into doing business with us. It just gives us
Right.
the option.
So we should probably encourage those smaller banks to apply to be on the list for when, opportunities may arise that are more attractive in the future.
Absolutely. I think that's a big push that we were trying, but the more that we can get that word out, and have the banks understand that, again, this is not something that they're forced to do, but it gives them the ability. If it's beneficial to them, it has to be financially feasible for them as well. Then it's a great opportunity for them to sign up and be on that list.
Okay, so we can try and do that. And kind of to that end, it brings me, I think it's a good transition to Chairman Osterman's point about bringing the banks to this hearing on Friday. I appreciate his leadership on that, but it kind of just brings to light, the historical impact banks have played, and disproportionately in a negative way, impacting, how especially minorities, Black and Brown people could not, get loans, build their wealth, be able to then, like smaller banks are feeling the pain now, kind of spread their cost over a lot of different projects. And so I think it's important that we hear this history and that we bring banks to kind of understand why we are where we are today, where a lot of companies, especially African American and Latino, can't compete because they were denied loans by a lot of these banks. They were redlined. Just a lot of historical data that speaks to kind of, where we are today. And so, again, I appreciate that leadership, and I too will hold my vote until I understand that they will appear and come before us on Friday to go over this history. So thank you for that. And thank you, Chairman, for this time.
You're welcome. Alderman LaSpada?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me all right on this end?
Yes.
Okay.
Can hear you fine.
Yep. Okay. Comptroller, just a couple quick questions. I was hoping that through the chair, before our council vote, if you could provide a list of who our municipal depositories have been for each of the last 5 years, and if you could also provide what are the fees that they generate from the city of Chicago for being municipal depositories. I'm just trying to get a clearer sense for myself, even as we do an RFP every year, how much turnover there is in our municipal depositories. And knowing that there's not a lot of revenue generated, still trying to understand what is the revenue they do generate from the city. Is that a fair request? Is that something you can provide before we vote on council?
Yes, yes. I've been working with the Treasurer's Office, Alderman Lasada, so we're going to work and get that information to you hopefully by tomorrow.
Okay, I appreciate that a lot. I just wanted to, and again, I hate to be duplicative, and I know we're going to talk about this more at Friday's Housing and Real Estate Committee hearing, but as Alderwoman King points out, like this is more than history. This is our present. Most Chicagoans know WBZ pointed this out over the last 6-7 years. JP Morgan Chase only did 1.93% of their loans in Black communities. Bank of America, 2.89%. Associated in Latino communities, 5.8%. Wells Fargo, 4.4% in Latino communities. We may have eliminated de jure redlining, but from a de facto perspective, it really seems to still be with us. And how do we make that case to Chicagoans that these institutions should be generating any revenue from our city?
Is that a question for me?
I don't mean it rhetorically. Sorry. I mean, how would the city have us talk to our constituents if we do get those questions?
I mean, I can
Because I do get those questions.
Right, no, and I completely understand that point, and it's definitely a valid point, right? I mean, there was concerns, I would say, even from a few years ago, and probably even now, that are there enough banking institutions located throughout the city, right? Like, do you have brick and mortar places that people can go to? Now, I can understand maybe in the current situation, people are not going as much to a physical bank, but those kind of questions have come up in the past. The questions that you proposed, Alderman Laspada, and then as Chairman Osterman and Chairman King have brought up as well. I think this is something that we have to look at and we have to push as government. When we look at the municipal depository side, I mean, this is really just to be able to meet our day-to-day obligations for cutting checks, making payroll, the O&M costs, meaning operating and maintenance costs, being able to pay for that and having a way to do that. If we don't have a banking institution, then we don't have a way to really issue out those checks and meet those requirements. And so, the banks that do charge a fee, and the fee that they would be charging is we're also collateralizing those accounts by 102% to protect the taxpayers' money. That is, whatever fees they're charging, they're incurring those administrative costs as well. So I wouldn't say that this probably this avenue of municipal depositories in the current situation or in the last few years has probably been the most financially beneficial to them, but that we still have a relationship with those banks, and there is a sense of prestige to be with the city and do business with the city, and I think that's where we need to push more. I know the Treasurer's Office and I have been talking about this, of how do we push that equity and equality out there. There might be equality, we don't see the equity. There are some banks that have reached out to me and of course to the Treasurer's Office separately, saying what they would like to do to be able to participate, and maybe offer some options and see if there's ways that we could do it. Some of the options we've heard about are like mobile banking, where they would actually come out like in a bus to neighborhoods and help people to maybe get an account, sign up for a small loan, have a line of credit, whatever they need. Another option that we've heard from some banks is that for first-time homeowners, they'd like to offer $3,000 to be able to, not as a loan, but sort of as amount of contribution for them to be able to achieve that dream of buying their own home. I think they've been looking at ways to see how we could get that out. Now, some of the issues have been, of course, with pandemic, to go out and take a bus in a community might not be the safest thing right now, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at those options in the next few coming weeks and months as things are getting better and push those options out. So some banks have come to us saying, can you help us with this? And I think that's up to us, between the Treasurer's Office, Comptroller's Office, to be able to push that through, push it through to the aldermanic offices, and then be able to push it through the community. Other banks, I would, I'm sure that they're listening, and I would just urge, this is extremely important for the community as a whole, all of the neighborhoods and communities as a whole to be able to grow. And we want the city to grow in all areas, not just, certain areas. Whatever they can contribute, they're investing back into that city that at the end of the day will give them benefits as well.
No, I appreciate all of that, Comptroller, because it is, your office was really great in providing to my office the CRA statements from all of these banks. It's strange to try to reconcile banks that have these high outstanding CRA ratings against what we see them doing in the city. So finding ways to resolve that, working with our communities on more equitable lending practices is positive. I'll ask one more question, one more quick statement. So I look on, and we've talked about this before, but the Illinois Treasurer's Department has their linked deposits program, which is on the state level. They actually make deposits of state level capital in community banks, credit unions, savings and loan companies for community development efforts that actually do make a return on investment for the state. Is there a reason that the state is able to do that the city is not?
So, this question you had brought up before, and actually I was working with the treasurer's office on this. Before we needed approval from city council, which we have. So this is something that the treasurer's office was not actually aware of, that we had this approval, because the approval was given back in 2012. And so knowing now that that option is there, the treasurer's office, and not to speak for them, it's just that Craig, who's our CIO, Chief Investment Officer, had to jump off for a community meeting. But he wanted me to reiterate that this is something that they're looking into to see what options we have. So definitely, thank you for bringing that up. And because of that, we've been looking at it more closely, and I'm sure that the treasurer's office can provide some more information in the near future to see what possibilities we have.
Well, I will make sure to follow up with the treasurer's office as well. That is very encouraging news that authorization already exists. All of these things that we're talking about are part of the reasons why the city is thinking critically about banking as a whole, thinking about whether this is the time to, in one form or fashion or another, explore municipal banking, as New York, Los Angeles, other cities are having these kinds of conversations. But I appreciate in this moment that we are calling them to task for racially inequitable lending and really thinking critically about how we use this relationship to start healing that. So thank you for your time and for your responses to these questions.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, all. Comptroller, thank you for reaching out to me this past weekend. I was sorry we were not able to touch base. But I want to echo the sentiments of first Chairman Osterman and then subsequent commentary by both Alderman and Austin. Several of the banks that were noted have a history of not being friendly to our communities. I'm not going to continue going in because my colleagues definitely brought the point home. But I think we need to be a lot more stern in our approach in dealing with financial institutions, organizations that benefit from our activity, but don't seem to reciprocate, and we benefit from them. People that have talked to me about my community, let's touch on the whole housing, homeownership. A lot of my community, I've lost a lot of homeowners. And I've had several conversations, and even from my own experience in dealing with some banks, they have not been friendly, amenable to working with our communities, but yet and still, we still do business with them that benefits them. By even having the smallest bank account in any of these banks benefit them. For the financial minded people, they need to meet a reserve requirement every night. And by us having funds on deposits in these particular banks, we benefit them. But it becomes a huge problem when we need to benefit from them. There's things that we're working on at the city. I talked to to Chairman Osterman, I talked to housing. We have to improve the housing ownership in our communities. What banks to this point have stepped up that we've actually talked to even help us with that effort? It's very minimal. I've seen smaller banks get gobbled up by larger banks, and the whole dynamics of that banking system when they were in the community has totally changed. And I'll go on record by saying one of the biggest offenders is Bank of America. And they're one of the ones on your list. So I won't be able to point out, I want to see what happens on Friday. I'm absolutely going to hold my vote today. I want to continue to work on this. But we have to stop as a city council, as a city. We have to stop being so forgiving when it comes to us, but we're not forgiving when it comes to people, what we need from other people. One other point I want to bring up, the city, we've been going through issues. I remember the last administration, we absolutely had issues with having financial institutions working with us to help us with our situation. Comptroller, you have the power. Jenny, you have the power. I'm sorry, CFO. We have to use our power and our influence, and we got to drive this home. And it shouldn't be an alderman from the 4th and only one from the 7th, and then one alderman here. We need to, as a city, the council and the administration, we need to put our foot down. If we're going to do business with you, we need reciprocity. There's things we need in our city, from home ownership, from small loans, from business loans, from whatever. And they need to be as amenable to us and our plight as we are to helping them keep their businesses afloat. That's all I have to say. But once again, I'll be holding mine until we find out what happens on Friday. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Lopez, before I jump over to you, Alderman Osterman, how many congressmen do you have showing up to that meeting?
Congressman Garcia is on the banking committee, the new banking committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. So he is confirmed to be in attendance, as well as our city treasurer and our state treasurer.
Okay. Do we have any representatives from those other congressional offices jumping in? Or sounds like a congressional issue too. If we're going to start here, let's get them involved as you're doing.
What I would say is that we want to come at this kind of across the board because the city has limited regulatory aspects. I think a lot of the lenders are regulated by the federal government. So I think, but we want to look at this holistically. So we will be reaching out to the further congressional delegations.
Sounds good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Alderman Lopez, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask, is there a reason why we need to pass this today if our other committee, the Housing and Real Estate Committee, is going to be addressing some of the banking issues at the end of this week?
So, since we had presented the list in December, and just to be able to ensure that, since it's an annual process, that we are approving in time, we wanted to bring it to the committee as soon as possible for their vote.
So does the ordinance that deals with the current existing municipal depositories expire at the end of this month? Is that why we are pursuing this? Or do we have time to allow the Housing Committee to act and then revisit this at next month's Finance Committee?
So if we don't approve, let's say, or we hold it, then the current list will stay active until it's approved.
Got it. Chairman, I think that there's
Alderman Lopez.
a lot of questions.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that maybe Alderman Osterman can say too, I think that's just a subject matter hearing on Friday for housing. I don't think there's a vote being taken, or is that Chairman Osterman?
Yeah, it's a subject matter hearing, and I think my intention is to generally try to get the lenders to be present there and to begin to partner with the city to address all these issues on housing in our communities that need it the most. And I think we continue to engage in conversations to get the lenders there. Ms. Sony has agreed to help support that, as other members of the administration. So I think, we're actively trying to get them there on Friday. And I think begin a conversation to lead us to what I would say is structural change, so that a year from now, when we're doing this, we can look to positive investments in communities on the south and west side. But I think part of this is right now, there's been a resistance and a reluctance to be present on Friday. So that's something that we're working through, and hopefully that will be resolved.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Alderman
Thank you,
Lopez.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Osterman. And I think exactly to your point, the banks have a reluctance to participate. And we are looking at partners who should be there. And I understand and appreciate that Friday is a subject matter hearing, and I think that will benefit all of us who participate to decide whether or not we want to be partners with banks like some that have been referenced already as our municipal partners if they refuse to meet us at least halfway just for a discussion on how to improve lending in African American and Latino neighborhoods. That's why I'm asking, Chairman, because I personally would rather hold this till next month to ensure that they have participation Friday, because having Congressman Garcia and 20 of us there with no banks isn't a conversation that's going to change the needle. But threatening banks, saying we will no longer use you or will blacklist you as being municipal depositories, might motivate someone. To the comptroller's point, the prestige of being our depository is about to be yanked from them for failing to participate. And if I may, Chairman Wagispack, I would make a motion to hold this item until next month so that subject matter hearing can go first, and then we can revisit this in March.
If you could hold your motion, I have other people who wish to speak too. And one thing I want to point out is not all of the banks on this list are the big banks that we're talking about. We actually have new banks on there that have not been able to participate in the past. But let me go over to Alderman Tunney first.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I brought this up in our briefings that we had before. This is not a new problem for the Finance Committee. But there's a couple of questions I want to ask. I know Alderman LaSpada brought up the 5-year history. Have we changed the RFP at all over the last 5 years? Have we done anything to either encourage or restrict or whatever? Because according to my briefing, these were the only banks that responded. And then the other question would be, is there a minimum number of depositories and or a maximum number? And then the RFP question is, I hope that either Law or our comptroller can answer that.
So Alderman Tunney, this is something that you had brought up before. Actually, I remember being in a meeting about 1.5 years ago, and you had brought up this very issue about how can we encourage, or what can we put in, what more, I guess more of a hammer can we put in for them to be able to participate more, either whether it's community involvement or doing more just with the smaller banks, things like that. We did have extensive discussions with Law, and Treasurer's Office was involved as well to see where we could actually push. Based upon, we do have some restrictions, and I would defer to Jim McDonald from Law, where he can explain more of what we can regulate and what we can't regulate. But we did put stronger language in this RFP to be able to say that we would have, that we are encouraging banks to provide more of their community involvement in development, and that would be looked upon as well. So, with those banks, we saw those CRA reports come in, and that's something that we can share with the committee as well. But those CRA reports, when we were reviewing it, most of them had excellent or very good ratings. So my understanding, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we can't regulate to say that they must meet a certain requirement, but we can, of course, make it stern. And what we've done is try to put in that language to make it more aggressive on our side, that this is something that we would look upon heavily.
Did the RFP change literally, or was it in the footnotes?
No, we added additional language in the RFP. I mean, again, we didn't put in like you are required to do this because my understanding is that we couldn't do that, but we did put in that we strongly encourage banks to be able to show their participation in the community involvement. And
Mr. McDonald, are you on?
Yes, sir.
If you could just introduce yourself, that'd be helpful for the record.
Jim McDonald, Deputy Corporation Counsel with the Law Department. And as Comptroller Sony had said, as a city, the city doesn't have jurisdiction to directly regulate the banks. The banks are regulated, state banks by the state or national banks by the federal government. So we understand there's desire to impose or encourage banks to take more actions in connection with those who are seeking to become municipal depositories. So in order to avoid a legal challenge that the city was indirectly attempting to regulate banks, we advised the comptroller and the treasurer's office on the wording of the RFP that we could encourage the banks to do this, but not make it a requirement for being designated as a depository. We're trying to walk a line between making clear the city's very strong policy interests and the extent of our legal authority.
Jim, thanks for the answer. My question, though, was in addition, I would like to see the changes in the RFP from 3 or 4 years ago till past, because obviously we need to incentivize because they're not responding. The vast majority of banks aren't even touching it, except the very large ones. But my other question was, is there a minimum number of depositories and or maximum?
And my understanding is no, that there's no minimum or maximum.
Okay. All right. So there's 3 banks, and I don't have the list of who's been invited to housing on Friday. I'm not on that committee, but it would be interesting to see the depositories that will be on Friday's meeting, and also the non-depositories that will be on the Friday meeting, because as I said earlier, we have some these regional banks, Northern Trust, Byline Bank, and Wintrust. These are all, like Wintrust says, it's Chicago's hometown bank. You know, it's just, I know it's a marketing slogan, but we've got to do something to widen the pool. And obviously, as many of my colleagues, and I've been saying this for years, either small business lending or mortgage lending has been almost non-existent for the years that I've been on the council. So I just think that this is certainly a need we've been talking about for years, and we just haven't seen it really open up that much. So thank you.
Comptroller Sony, which were the new banks on the list from prior years? Do you happen to have that?
I don't have it
Harrison?
with me. I can definitely provide that. I think
Just 1 second.
my understanding was probably MUFG was one of the newer ones. Huntington, I think, was one of the newer ones, but I can verify and submit through the chair. Chairman, I think you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Sorry, hitting the wrong button there. Alderman Hairston, did you have a question? Were you up?
It wasn't a question. I just didn't know whether you wanted to hold this or whether we would do a roll call vote.
Yeah, I was just gonna hold it in committee, but I wanted to get the questions answered first before we hold and go back. Thanks for that. Sorry, I'm just looking at some other. Give me 1 second. Okay. Alderman Dowell? Sorry, jump in and you can jump in there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Reshma, is it possible for you to give us an understanding of other opportunities that may be available with the city for small, financial institutions that you're looking at?
Yes, and again, partnering with the treasurer's office because they have more of the day-to-day activity and involvement. But definitely other options that we have out there is for investments, let's say, and what the treasurer's office has been doing. For example, let's say with GN Bank, they had done a CD with GN Bank, a $20 million CD, and this was a year, I think about a year ago or so. But it was at an interest rate that was something that GN Bank could make some money off of because it was being held for more than a year. We got an interest rate off of that, so it was following the investment policy and gave that ability for that bank to be, running contender, let's say, and whatever they could afford to do, we were doing, with them in partnership. So that was one example of what we were looking at ways to get these smaller banks to be able to participate. Now, for them to do, if it's investments, they don't necessarily need to be a municipal depository as long as the investment vehicle is such that it's not really a municipal depository function. But those are definitely options like that are out there for those smaller banks to do. And that's what I know the treasurer's office has been working with those banks as well as our office to be able to explain some of the other options that are there that we could partner with them and work with them. So I'm hoping that this meeting will help also to get that word out for the banks to understand that there's many other options, right? It's not just us cutting checks for payroll or cutting checks for operations. There are other things that we need municipal depositories for. It could be, setting up a CP or small line for one of a grant, or maybe a small program that we need to do and they could earn something off of that. So there's other options that are out there.
What about, I recall we had some smaller banks, for example, at the airport. Mm-hmm. Is that still a possibility?
And I think absolutely, this is where we want to encourage banks to certify themselves as an ACDBE. One of the things, Chairman, that we were looking at is to see if we could get that ACDBE exemption and see if there was an option for that. But the smaller banks, even if they can apply for a ACDBE certification, most of them would meet, I think all of them probably would meet the criteria. It's a free application. The city itself does the certification. And we would love to encourage those smaller banks to do that. We can provide more information. If they want to contact me, I can give them some additional information on how to go about it. And we can work with the DPS and with the Department of Aviation. I know this is something that Commissioner Rhee has been really pushing for as well. So we would love to get more participation from those smaller banks. And that's a great example because that is a way for them to actually make it financially feasible and a way for them to earn income. So we would love to encourage that.
So while we're looking at these structural modifications, I do think if you could sort of brainstorm in your office and with members of the council on other opportunities, locations for small banks and financial institutions to get involved, that would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairwoman Dowell. Comptroller, this doesn't impair any ability to issue checks, right?
No, if we held it down, all it would do is the current list that's out there.
Continues. Okay, and I apologize. I was actually looking at the list from 3 years ago, a little bit earlier. That's why I had the wrong list up in front of me. But this won't impair the ability of new banks on this list, like GN or newer ones, GN, MUFG, maybe Huntington, from being able to still partake in the ability to be an MD. They're not calling you saying, "Hey, we need this right now." They're still on the list.
They are on the list. They are calling to your point because they've submitted their applications back in October, let's say, and now we're at the end of February. So they're interested to see what the options are. and how they could do business. So we are getting calls, but at this point, those banks would be on hold until, let's say, if it gets approved next month, and until next month.
So that doesn't impair some of their other, if they're sitting there in October saying, here, we have a shot at being an MD, have they talked to you about doing any other investments that would, if this was held up another, a month's not going to hurt, but maybe several months might hurt them from making long-range planning?
Agreed. I agree. The day-to-day operations, again, it's with the treasurer's office because of segregation of duties.
Right.
We cut the checks. We want to make sure that the treasurer's office is the one that has the day-to-day relationship. I think, a month would be okay, but probably more than that if they were looking for some opportunities, or if we wanted to give them some opportunities of, maybe doing something smaller, or as things get better. Until it gets approved by City Council, we wouldn't be able to approach those banks.
Okay, then why don't we work to look at some of these other possibilities in the short term. Before I say I'm going to hold this, I do have Alderman Burke that wished to speak first.
Chairman,
there you go. Yes.
I think if you're looking at a list from 3 years ago, you might check to see which of those are changes of name. Like,
oh, right.
I think Huntington might have been a change of name in the interim. So realistically, there probably aren't any that are really new additions.
Okay.
I think. I'd have to look at the list that you're referring to that's from 3 years ago, but it may be the case.
Yes, and I just wrote them down, so I didn't have them, the official letter, I think, from 3 years ago, but I was just using it as a comparison, so I'll double check that.
And Chairman, I'm
yes.
sorry, Chairman, I do have the list of the new banks that are on this request, and that's Zions Bank, MUFG, and Wells Fargo. Those are the 3 new banks that are on the list. Chairman, I think you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hold this in committee, and I appreciate the input from everyone. Comptroller, why don't we sit down afterwards? We can make sure we lay out the information, I think, as each alderman wanted it, in a little more succinct manner. We will follow up with these other banks, as Alderman Osterman was trying to do, to get some of these representatives to his meeting. We will all follow up and encourage them to show up and listen, if not make some substantive changes to their policies. But I do appreciate you coming on today and explaining this. I know you've been working really diligently on it all weekend with several aldermen and having multiple conversations, just trying to get this information out there. So I really appreciate you coming in, and Mr. McDonald as well. But we will hold this until the next meeting and hopefully be ready by then with a more comprehensive approach to how we do this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Comptroller. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Let me just set up for our next. That was item number 3 on the agenda, so that will be held. Municipal depositories, and we will come back to that one at the next meeting, hopefully with some other policy looks at it as well. And I know we were working with the treasurer on that, so we will include them in the conversation a little bit more in this one. So moving on to item number 4. Item number 4, if everyone's ready here, is recommending a proposed ordinance regarding the authority to issue free permits and associated fee waivers for all applications filed by the Chicago Board of Education or its contractors for buildings, facilities, and projects used for public or governmental purposes, with quarterly reporting of waivers to the Office of Budget and Management. We are joined by Ivan Hansen, the Executive Director of Capital Planning, and Eben Smith, the Director of Design and Planning from Chicago Public Schools, for testimony on this matter. And let me just make sure we have Ivan here. Ivan, are you ready to speak?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and give us a background on this, and then we'll take questions from the City Council. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Committee on Finance. Thank you for having me today. As the Chairman stated, my name is Ivan Hansen. I'm the Executive Director of Capital Planning and Construction for Chicago Public Schools. The Board of Education is seeking the Committee's approval for a 2-year renewal of the city's fee waiver ordinance. This ordinance waives demolition, public way use, and other permit fees for capital projects managed by the Board of Education. There are no changes from the previous ordinance, and the board will require to seek renewal on a biannual basis. This is a long-standing arrangement, and the board has historically been exempt from paying most city permit fees. The ordinance will not impose any direct cost on the city. I'd also like to note that should council approve this ordinance, the board would be exempt from paying permit fees, but the board would still have to obtain building permits. The board will continue to comply with all applicable provisions set forth by the municipal code. All required permits and licenses shall be submitted for review to the Department of Buildings or other appropriate city departments. This includes permits required for buildings, land, and facilities. All construction plans shall maintain compliance with the applicable provisions of the code and any rules duly promulgated thereunder. Most importantly, this ordinance would continue to allow funds that would be used to pay permits fees to instead be reinvested in Chicago Public Schools capital projects, allowing us to make further progress in addressing our deferred capital need. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my testimony, and I'd like to thank the committee for their time and continued partnership, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ivan. Are there any questions from committee members or aldermen? All right. No questions. Then on item number 4, may I have a motion for approval of that same roll call used to establish quorum?
So moved, Alderman Spazzato.
Alderman Scott.
Okay, moved by Alderman Spazzato. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you for being here, Ivan. Appreciate you waiting and giving us that background. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, items number 5, 6, and 7 are related to Chicago Park District items. Our first item for the Park District is number 5. This is a communication recommending a proposed ordinance regarding the authority to enter into and execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Park District for the use of tax increment financing funds for certain improvements to Austin Town Hall, located at 5610 West Lake Street. Beth Tomlins and Tiffany Sostrin from the Chicago Park District are with us today for testimony and to take any questions. And I think we will start with Beth on this. Are you there, Beth?
Apologies, I was having some technical difficulties. I absolutely apologize.
That's all right. Why don't you give us we're going to have you give us a background on each one of these, starting with number 5. This is the 5610 West Lake Street.
Yes, let me, I'm going to try to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second.
Just make sure you have screen sharing capabilities there.
Okay. I apologize.
It's all right.
Okay, let me just start the slides here.
Okay.
Okay.
Did tech support give you the capability to share the screen?
Yeah, she's a co-host.
Okay. Alderman Taliaferro, did you have a comment, or were you just going to speak to this one after presentation?
I was going to speak to this one after the presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, my goodness.
Hey Beth, it's Tiff. Do you need me to share the slides?
Yes, that would be awesome if you could, Tiffany. I'm having trouble on my end. the Austin Town Hall first, please. You have them? While Tiffany is trying to pull it up, I'll just begin the narrative.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Again, my apologies. Good morning, Chairman Wagasback and members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Beth Tomlins, and I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the Chicago Park District. I'm also joined by Tim Jeffries, Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Planning and Development, and Tiffany Solstrin, the Director of Legislative and Community Affairs for the Park District. I am here today to request your approval of an intergovernmental agreement that would provide the Chicago Park District with up to $1.5 million in TIF assistance to make improvements to Austin Town Hall. The project is located at 5610 West Lake Street in the Austin community area and the 29th Ward. It is also located within the Madison-Austin TIF District at Madison-Austin TIF District. If we go to the second slide, here's an aerial view of the property where Lake Street and the CTA Green Line are to the south, Central Avenue to the east, Chicago Public Library Austin Branch to the north, and Parkside Avenue to the west. We can go to the next slide. Austin Town Hall is one of 18 neighborhood cultural centers in the city. The Park District Cultural Centers allow for classes and events that showcase the arts, host organizations as artists in residence, and provide affordable performances and rehearsal space for neighborhood artists. If approved, the scope of work will include improvements to the facility, including electrical service upgrades, ADA access improvements, interior remodeling of the auditorium, as well as other on-site restoration improvements. The estimated total project cost for this work is $2.4 million. If approved, the intergovernmental agreement will authorize up to $1.5 million in TIF assistance. Next slide. These are just some pictures of the existing conditions of the building. Interior finishes throughout the building will be restored upon completion of the masonry and roof work to eliminate damaging water infiltration. And then this is the auditorium that will receive a remodel to provide accessible stage access and electric service upgrades to support the requirements of performance-based sound and lighting systems. I thank you for your consideration of this request, and I'm available to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Beth and Tiffany. Alderman Talaferro, let me go to Alderman Scott before I have you wrap up, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, Alderman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, want to say congratulations to Alderman Talaferro. This is an improvement that I think is greatly needed. When I was at the Park District, my office happened to be at Austin Town Hall, and some of that disrepair was there even 10 years ago. The one thing that I wish were to happen, I know that there was down in the basement, there's a lot of disrepair. So is there a plan for the basement in this with the 1.5? I know you can't get everything in with 1.5, and I know that the rooms downstairs where they change for the pool, I know that they were in disrepair as well. So just wondering, is there any work on the basement that's going to happen in this 1.5?
So we are still in design on a lot of the components, so I will absolutely take a note and add that to our scope to investigate, Mr. Alderman Scott.
Well, thank you. Again, I think that the improvements there are greatly needed. Austin Town Hall is a cultural hub in the Austin community and has been for quite some time. And any improvements in and around Austin Town Hall, I think it's greatly needed and greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time. Thank you, Beth and Tiffany, for your presentation.
Thank you, Alderman.
Thanks, Alderman Scott. Alderman Mitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Support this ordinance because Austin Town Hall is across the street, and it's a facility that I use regularly, whereas we may be bound by wards. Our communities are not bound by wards. We go all over. So Austin Town Hall is a jewel. I'm grateful for the improvement that they're going to be looking at including arts, and there are many programs because it has the right facility. It is historic facility, such as La Follette Park. So I want to stand and make sure that it is noted and I'm on record of my support for the improvement that's much needed for the Austin Town Hall. And thank you all very much. Thanking the Park District and the team that are able to put this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Mitz. And Alderman Taliaferro.
Thank you, Chairman Wagasback, and let me thank Tiffany and Beth as well for all of their hard work in bringing this ordinance before us. And I want to appreciate my colleagues, Alderman Mitz, and Alderman support as well. And just before I start, Scott, I want to address Chairman Scott's question with regard to the locker rooms. And I know over the last several years, we have worked on renovating the locker room as well as we did the pool. And I believe it was 2018. We did allocate funds toward the locker rooms and the pool area. We did some work outside as well, but this is an Austin landmark that is in need of repair right away. It's been deteriorating for quite a while, and that's why I'm very appreciative of Ms. Sostrin and Beth's emphasis being placed on this, because it's well used by our public. It's well used by elected officials in the community there, but it's falling apart. And so I think we need to preserve this landmark that's in Austin on the west side of Chicago to the best ability that we can. And it also goes with in very much in line with the quality of life plan that was put together by Austin coming together and other organizations to whereby Chairman Mitz, myself, Alderman Irvin all had some input in. And Central Avenue is definitely where the Austin Town Hall sits. It's definitely an area where we'd like to continue improving. So I want to thank each of my colleagues for their support and ask for your favorable consideration on this ordinance, as it would take a park that's being run down. As the longer we go and the longer we go without putting effort into the upkeep of it, it will make this a more viable space for our children to come and utilize, as well as continued adult use and elected officials use. So thank you so much, and I ask for your favorable consideration on your vote. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Taliaferro. Alderman Spizzato.
Thank you, Chairman. Alderman Taliaferro, growing up as a park rat as a kid, I know how valuable parks can be to communities. I truly and honestly believe schools and parks are just big time anchors to communities. So it'd be awesome to get that fixed up and have the community using it again. So hats off to you and Beth and Tiffany. Thank my brother over here, Chris, for getting this accomplished. And that's about it. Good to see you, Tiff. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman. So on Alderman Scott's former office location, he has a motion for approval by the same roll call used to establish quorum. Moved by Alderman Scott. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Congratulations, Alderman, all of you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is item number 6, and this is a communication recommending a proposed ordinance regarding the authority to enter into and execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Park District for the use of tax increment financing for certain improvements at West Pullman Park, located at 401 West 123rd Street. We will have Beth Tomlins and Tiffany Sostrin speak to this one again, and we're going to have Alderman Austin open for us after we hear from the Park District.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank
Or
you very
Alderman
much.
Austin, did you want to do a prelude to Ms. Tomlin's?
No, let her go right ahead first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning again, Mr. Chairman Wagasback and members of the Finance Committee. For the record, my name is Beth Tomlins. I'm the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for Chicago Park District, also joined by Tim Jeffries, Deputy Commissioner in the Department of Planning, and Tiffany Sostren, Director of Legislative and Community Affairs for the Park District. I'm here today to request your approval of an intergovernmental agreement that would provide the Chicago Park District with up to $1.4 million in TIF assistance to make improvements to the West Pullman Fieldhouse. The project is located, Tiffany can go to the next slide, at 401 West 123rd Street in the West Pullman community area and the 34th Ward. It is also located with the 119th and Halsted TIF District. Next slide. West Pullman Park is one of 18 neighborhood cultural centers in the city. The Park District Cultural Centers allow for classes and events that showcase the arts, host organizations as artists in residence, and provide affordable performances and rehearsal space for neighborhood artists. If approved, the scope of work will include facility improvements, including stabilization of the building envelope, roof replacement, and extensive masonry repairs. Cultural center upgrades focused on electrical service upgrades, ADA access improvements, and interior remodeling of the auditorium. The estimated total project cost for this work is $2.5 million. If approved, the intergovernmental agreement will authorize up to $1.4 million in TIF assistance. And Tiffany, you can go through the next couple slides to show existing conditions. So a photo of the roof that needs replacement. Next slide is interior damage to be repaired due to water infiltration. Some additional work for interior work that needs restoration. Again, water damage throughout the building that will be addressed once we make the building tight and dry. I thank you for your consideration of this request, and I'm available to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay, Alderman Austin, would you like to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Tiffany. And I can thank the Park District, but the champion in this project is my partner, Alderman Anthony Beal. Because if it wasn't for Alderman Beal, this would not take place. I mean, but with his diligence in order to help, and he saw the disrepair in regards to, excuse me one second, the disrepair at the Park District, and we both have seen such horrific disrepair in the Park District. So jump right in and says, well, you know, Mama, let's do this. So I am absolutely grateful for his support of this project, and hopefully we have a favorable vote on this for us, for our children that utilize this Park District. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And before you go there, Alderman Burke has a statement or a question. You're on mute.
I'm mute. Mute.
You're on mute, sir. Start. You got
Hear me now?
Yes. Try again there. Yeah.
I'm pleased to be able to join with distinguished alderman from the 34th Ward and acknowledge the work that our colleague Anthony Beal was responsible for in bringing this about. But I have another reason to say something about West Pullman Park, and perhaps the officials at the Park District might find a few dollars available from these new resources to take note of the fact that it was West Pullman Park that served as the location for the groundwork that created Special Olympics over 50 years ago.
Yep.
It was at West Pullman Park that a young physical education instructor had the idea and the concept for Special Olympics. And I'm sure that Alderman Matt O'Shea can enlighten the members of the committee about how far-reaching that has become in terms of not only national but international results. But it was the Chicago Park District at West Pullman Park where Special Olympics began over 50 years ago. Just thought I'd bring that to attention of the members.
I don't know if Matt can attest to that though, Ed, because I don't think he's 50 yet.
Thank you. Alderman Beal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to chime in and congratulate Alderman Austin. West Pullman Park is a park that one of the few in the area that I actually grew up in and played in as a kid. All my basketball days and baseball days, and there's a lot of rich history as far as sports coming out of West Pullman Park. And so I'm just really excited to see these improvements that are going to be going into that park, and because it is an anchor in the 34th Ward, and it borders right there on the 9th Ward. So we're really excited to see this thing moving forward. So
34-9.
34-9. As 9 goes, so does 34, and so 34, so goes 9. And so we're a partner out here making things happen. And again, just seeing these improvements, because we all know what sports can do for leadership and workmanship and just the whole gamut as it relates to kids and what it can do for their growth. And so I'm excited to see this happening. So congratulations, Alderman Austin, and thank you, Chairman Burke, for giving us that history lesson as he so eloquently does on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much, everybody, and congratulations.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Scott, and then Harris.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Want to congratulate both Alderman Austin and Alderman Beal on this project. Like many of my colleagues have said, parks are the lifeblood of communities. They are anchors in our communities. I just wanted to make mention that if Alderman Beal was raised in that park, then that's probably why there's disrepair. Just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. And again, congratulations all, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alderman Scott. Alderman Harris.
Hey, I just want to chime in, and I want to thank Chairman Austin and Alderman Beal. And I just want to tell everybody that Alderman Beal is a good neighbor. He supports the aldermen all around him for projects in my ward and everything else. So I really want to commend him for being a good partner with Chairman Austin. And I want to thank Chairman Burke for the history lesson today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Harris. Alderman Beal, I don't know if you want to respond to that. Was it broken windows from home runs? Was it broken rims from slams? But I would like to have a motion for approval by the same roll call used to establish quorum from Alderman Beal.
So move.
Okay. Moved by Alderman Beal. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you very much, Alderman Austin, Alderman Beal. Congratulations. All right, and item number 7, ladies and gentlemen. This is another communication recommending a proposed agreement regarding the authority to enter into and execute an IGA with the Chicago Park District for the use of tax increment financing funds for certain improvements at Donovan Park, located at 3609 South. Got it misspelled here. Ludwika Avenue. Thank you, Chairman. We have Beth Tomlins that will present the Donovan Park IGA.
Thank you again, Chairman Wagasback and members of the Finance Committee. Again, for the record, my name is Beth Tomlins, Deputy Chief Operating Officer for the Chicago Park District. I'm here with Tim Jeffries, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Planning and Development, and Tiffany Sostrin, Director of Legislative and Community Affairs for the Chicago Park District. I'm here today to request your approval of an intergovernmental agreement that would provide the Chicago Park District with up to $850,000 in TIF assistance to make improvements to the property that has been recently acquired to expand Donovan Park. There we go. The project is located at 3620 South Luthananica Avenue in the Bridgeport community area and the 11th Ward. It is also located within the 35th and Halsted TIF. Donovan Park's expansion will include the existing right-of-way and the parcel to the east of Luthwanica. The new park provides an additional 0.46 acres to Donovan Park. If approved, the TIF funds will be used to ensure the site is environmentally remediated to Park District standards, and the site will be developed as a passive open green space. You can go to the next slide. The Chicago Park District has applied for open space impact fee funds generated for the Bridgeport community area to be applied to the acquisition cost of this new property. That authorizing ordinance is expected to be on the agenda for the May council meeting through the Special Events, Cultural Affairs, and Recreation Committee. I thank you for consideration of this, and I'm available to address any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Beth. This is in Alderman Thompson's ward. Alderman Thompson, did you wish to speak to the item?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And for the record, it's Litwanica. Pronunciation. We have a lot of Lithuanian that lived in the community, and so that is in our community. It's Green Street and other communities. It's just west of Halsted. So anyway, I appreciate working with the Park District administration to make this happen. We've had over the last decade a tremendous amount of development in and around this park, residential development that is, and so the expansion of this park, utilizing it with ultimately a new field house on this site, is the plan here, and we appreciate the Park District's cooperation, Superintendent Mike Kelly for all his work, and the whole team at the Park District for making this happen. So we appreciate it, and I would respectfully request my colleagues on the committee to support this expansion of a great park. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. On item number 7, may I have a motion for approval by the same roll call used to establish quorum? Oh, hold that for a second, please. Alderman Hopkins. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there till the last second.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to congratulate Alderman Thompson and suggest that this is an outstanding addition to that park. I'm familiar with it, and I'm familiar with that neighborhood, and I know it's going to be a welcome addition. So I will make the motion for approval.
Perfect, thank you. Moved by Alderman Hopkins. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you very much, Beth and Tiffany, and congratulations, Alderman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to item number 8 in the Department of Law. Moving on to communications from the Department of Law, item number 8 is the monthly report of judgment, verdict, and settlements from the Department of Law for the month of December, and this will be placed on file with the clerk.
Chairman.
Alderman Lopez, or was that Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted a quick follow-up on item number 8. I know almost 1 year ago, I introduced a resolution so that we could have hearings on some of these routine, repetitive settlements and judgments that we get. Do you know if we'll be able to schedule any hearings on these matters in this year so that we can start discussing with departments what they're doing to stop causing these settlements on a monthly basis?
You know what, I will definitely get that set up. I know that the city is also working on hiring a new chief risk officer, and that was part of the conversations we were having with the former CRO. So in the time that we're trying to, the city's looking for that new CRO, I'll work to set that up with some of the other departments as you had asked. If that's, you're on.
Sorry, that works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Irvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to speak on the same vein. I guess Ray and I are on the same wavelength. Write this down, please. Yeah, with the risk management litigation, I do want to congratulate the law department. I did not see any FOIA litigation or settlements this month, which has been an ongoing theme. So I'm hoping that there's been some change in the process there to eliminate that. One question I did have is that I did see some amounts over $100,000, and I just wanted to be sure that those were amounts that we previously gave settlement authority on that may have just been paid out in the month of January, or with these settlements that we had not seen that were paid out. That was the only question I really had.
Okay, I think we had Jeff Levine. I thought he was on this call. Maybe I just lost him here. Hold on, Alderman Irvin. Jeff, are you available to take that question, or is that something Jim can answer, or Renee? Hold on one second, Alderman Irvin. Okay.
I would have to go back to, I'll have to check.
It's the question. This is Renee Rodney here, First Assistant at the Law Department. The question was about the settlements listed in the spreadsheet from January. And
Yes,
you wanted
ma'am.
to
And,
confirm,
welcome back.
you wanted to confirm that everything over $100,000 had been heard by the committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely, yes. Was there one in particular you had a question about?
No, I just saw the numbers. I recall the one with the former Chicago police commander, but there was another one in there that was over $100,000. And I just didn't know if that was just paid out or if that was something that was settled that we just had not heard, because it just didn't ring any familiarity to me when I saw the names.
Well, the way this spreadsheet is broken out, it'll have payment to the plaintiff and then payment to the plaintiff's attorney. So it's possible the plaintiff's attorney name looked unfamiliar, but any amount over $100,000 certainly would have been brought before this committee. If you see something that reads as a settlement or judgment in lieu of satisfaction, which I don't see on here, that's something that would not be brought before the committee because that's not a traditional settlement, but I don't see any in this January spreadsheet that
If you could just check that to be sure, I just appreciate it, that's all.
Sure, and if there's a specific one you have a question about, I can certainly go back and look at that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Alderman. 1 second there. Okay. Let me just go back and make sure I don't have any other questions. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, items 9 and 10 are authorizations for the payment of various small claims against the city and the denial of payment of various small claims against the city. If there's no objections, these items will be placed on the omnibus. All right, now we will move on to the supplemental agenda, and I know Renee Rodney is ready to go here. She was just on the call. Renee, are you ready for first one of these? Okay.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 settlement orders today. One is in the case of Franklin. This is 1A versus City of Chicago in the amount of $175,000. And then we'll have 1B after that with Pamela Anderson versus the City of Chicago in the amount of $400,000. So Renee, which would you like to start with there?
I can start with Franklin since it's
Yep.
first on the
Sorry.
agenda. That's fine.
All yours.
Just for the record, good afternoon. My name is Renee Rodney. I'm First Assistant Corporation Counsel, and I'm here to present 2 settlements for your consideration. As reflected in the agenda, the first settlement is Franklin et al. Versus City of Chicago and others. This settlement involves a lawsuit brought by a family of 4 as a result of 5 Chicago police officers forcing entry into their apartment to execute an arrest warrant in March 2017. The officers breached the Franklin's door, entered their apartment with weapons drawn, and looked around for the target of an arrest warrant. The target, however, actually lived in the apartment below the Franklins and was apprehended without incident after the officers realized they were in the wrong place. The law department proposes settling this case for $175,000, inclusive of attorney's fees and costs to minimize the city's exposure. On March 23rd, 2017, at approximately 6 o'clock in the morning, CPD officers who were working as part of a federal law enforcement task force to serve arrest warrants on several targets, wanted for drug and gun offenses, forced entry into the Franklin's apartment at 2706 West Flournoy, apartment 2. The target of the arrest warrant, Gregory King, lived in apartment 1 at 2706 West Flournoy. At this address is a 3-unit apartment building. Apartment 1 is directly accessible by a below-grade door that faces the street. Apartment 2, the Franklin's home, is accessible by a separate exterior staircase leading up to an unmarked door that opens to a vestibule for the upper floor apartments. The Franklin's door marked with number 2 is not visible from the street and is accessible only after entry into the vestibule. The officers explained that they approached this door based on their belief that apartment 1 signified the first floor, accessible by going up the stairs rather than the garden basement level unit. And that because King's dwelling was a garden basement level unit, they were not looking at the door and did not see 1 or 2 on the unit doors until after breaching the Franklin's home. The officers and Franklin's versions of the exchange before the breach and what occurred after entry is disputed. The officers claim they banged on the door at the top of the stairs, and Ashanti Franklin, one of the plaintiffs, appeared in the front window of her apartment and asked what was going on. One of the officers asked Ashanti to open the door and stated that they were looking for Gregory King. Ashanti stated that he did not live there. The officer who was holding the ram claims he then saw through the Franklin's front window a man whom he believed was King. Based on the exchange with Ashanti seeing a figure in the window and believing that they were correctly approaching apartment 1, the target's location, the officers first ran through the outer door into the vestibule and then ran through the Franklin's front door and into their apartment. The officers had their guns out and yelled loudly at the family to get into a single location where they could be secured. After about 5 minutes, the officers realized that King was not there, and some of them went down the stairs to search the basement apartment, where they arrested King without incident. The officers denied pointing their weapons directly at the Franklins and denied making offensive statements. According to the Franklins, the officers banged on the door, and when Ashanti appeared at the window, they said they were looking for Gregory Hines and would break down the door if not let in. Ashanti tried to explain to them that they were at the wrong house. She also asked them if they had a warrant and asked to see it. In response, they said if she did not open the door, they would break it down. Ashanti yelled to a family member that the officers were looking for someone named Gregory Hines. Then the officers broke down the door. Once inside, the Franklins testified that the officers cursed at them when asked if they had a warrant. The adult plaintiffs also claimed that one of the officers held them at gunpoint, while 3 other officers searched each room of their home. Plaintiffs claim the officers failed to provide their names and badge numbers in the arrest warrant despite repeated requests. Plaintiffs claim that about 45 minutes after the officers left, excuse me, the sergeant arrived at their apartment but never showed them the arrest warrant despite them asking to see it. The case carries a substantial risk of an adverse verdict if it proceeds to trial. As a general rule, an arrest warrant does not allow officers to enter the homes of third parties to effect an arrest. King's apartment was clearly marked with a 1, and the officers failed to observe the 1 on the door to the garden unit prior to approaching the Franklin's vestibule. Plaintiffs will likely be able to portray the officers' actions as incompetent and that they should have known, excuse me, and that they should have known which was King's apartment. Photographs taken by the Franklins on the day of the search show that their door was clearly marked with a 2, which the officers missed or ignored after they breached the vestibule door. Additionally, photographs in the record show that the King's street-facing apartment door had a number 1 displayed on it. COPA sustained various allegations against the sergeant and officers involved in the execution of the arrest warrant. COPA recommended that the officer with the ram be suspended for 5 days, and he is currently grieving that recommendation. The other officers received violation notices, but COPA did not recommend suspension or other discipline. COPA found it was not reasonable for the officers to believe King lived in or was present in apartment 2 and found that there were no exigent circumstances present. In doing so, COPA found that the officers violated the Franklin's 4th Amendment rights. All 4 plaintiffs claimed severe emotional distress from the experience, and 2 of the plaintiffs sought mental health treatment. The medical bills thus far total approximately $23,235. One of the plaintiffs named Romel has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety as a result of the incident. Ashanti has been diagnosed with major depressive order, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. To limit the city's financial exposure, the law department recommends settling this case for approximately $175,000, which includes attorney's fees and costs. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rodney. First question from Alderman Taliaferro.
Thank you, Chairman Wagasback. Ms. Rodney, you mentioned as you began briefing us on this one, you mentioned that it was a part of a federal law enforcement task force. Were there any other agencies that were a part of this lawsuit, that were a part of this arrest warrant entry? And if so, are they sharing in the liability here?
Yes, it was a joint task force with the DEA and the FBI. They were not, excuse me, one of the FBI agent was named as a defendant, but plaintiffs never served him with a complaint. So they are not sharing in the liability here.
So none of the other agencies, was this a Chicago arrest warrant, or was the arrest warrant from one of the federal agents?
I don't know. Let me check.
Okay, that's very important, Ms. Rodney, that we get that information. Because if this is not a Chicago arrest warrant, and Chicago just participated with this task force in executing an arrest warrant, I can't believe that we are holding the bag for it at 100%. You know, I understand, as you briefed this earlier, that, you know, the actions of the officers in breaching the wrong apartment is indefensible. There are no defenses to it. It's cut and dry. They entered the wrong apartment. The problem I have with this is, you know, the inability, number one, to answer that very important question, and number two, why the other agencies aren't sharing in this liability. But I also have a problem with this because of the amount that we're settling for. There are no egregious actions being alleged against the officers. They recognize that they made a mistake, and they immediately fixed the door, and they should be compensated. I agree with you, but I don't agree with the compensation to the tune of $175,000. This case should be settled for much less. The actual damages in this case alone are only $23,000, and we're settling for $175,000. I think that's too far and disproportionate of a number with regard to the actual damages in this case. So I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this item until we could get these questions answered as far as shared liability. And was this the Chicago Police Department search warrant, or whether it was a search warrant of one of the federal agencies? That's all I have, Chairman Wagasback. You can record me as a no on this vote.
Okay, thanks, Alderman Taliaferro.
May I respond?
Yes, go ahead, Renee.
Well, as I mentioned, there was an FBI agent named. He was not served. Obviously, the city has to respond to suits in which it is served. I am trying to find out who issued the arrest warrant, but the fact of the matter is that several CPD officers took part in the execution of that warrant, and the supervisor who came on the scene was a CPD sergeant. So as I understand it, the officers were part of a task force with the FBI and DEA, serving arrest warrants on several targets for various drug and gun offenses. So I'll find out who issued it, but it was ultimately CPD officers who entered the wrong apartment, despite information they had in what's called the target packet about where that warrant should have been executed. And I believe I did provide information through the chairman after the briefing about the settlement negotiations in the case. So you're aware of how we arrived at that number. But I can say it was after a settlement conference with the involvement of the court.
Ms. Rodney, I think, you know, and the reason I say that we're settling for so much, because CPD has hundreds of these lawsuits, and will perhaps have hundreds of these lawsuits based on wrongful entry. this is a wrongful entry without any egregious allegations being made against the police officers. So we're setting a bar, a low bar. A foundation of 175,000, to which a complainant or plaintiff would be entitled to without any egregious allegations whatsoever. And I think that's a dangerous precedent to set with such a high figure when there is no egregious allegation. Now, this is not comparable to what Ms. Young suffered. There are no further allegations in this particular case to which any of us can probably conclude were egregious in context. So I think we're setting the bar way too high for a wrongful entry, wrong address. Like I say, I don't think it's defensible to a point where CBD should not be held liable and the city should not be held liable. But I do believe that we're setting a dangerous precedent by setting the bar so high when there's no egregious allegation. Or should I say setting the bar so low? Because all I have to do is have just the wrong entry and I'm entitled to 175,000 if I claim emotional distress or PTSD, which is subjective, by the way. I would settle this case for under $100,000.
If I can respond to one of your earlier questions, Alderman, the warrant was issued by a Cook County judge. It was a joint operation and the warrant was issued by a Cook County judge.
Right, they're going to issue the warrant, but I'm asking which agency requested the warrant or which agency went before the judge asking. Was it CPD? Was it the DEA? Was it FBI? Who appeared before the judge requesting this warrant? Was it all three?
I'm looking at a copy of the warrant now. I'm trying to see if it has that level of detail. There's a state prosecutor name on it, the judge's name, of course, and the clerk's name. It says, I don't have a particular affiant. I mean, it's an arrest warrant, but I don't have a, okay, it says arresting officer, police officer, name listed, agency unit, CPD. So that's what's on the listed as a complainant in the arresting officer name.
Right. That still does not answer the question as to, and it's actually a relatively easy thing to find out which agency, or was it the Joint Task Force themselves, but what agency is considered the agency that that sought the arrest warrant because of the actions of the person that lived downstairs. If CPD was seeking the arrest and they got the Joint Task Force involved, then it's on CPD, but also liability should be, and CPD also, I'm saying from not CPD, but if these other agencies were not made a part of this suit, I wonder why you guys didn't intervene and bring them into this suit as well. To share liability in my case, in my opinion.
Renee,
I don't.
Do you have anything else?
I don't know. I don't have that answer right now. If I can get it before the end of this meeting, I'll certainly share it, but I don't know.
Alderman? Chairman, for those reasons, I just asked my colleagues not to support a settlement on this above the amount of $100,000, to which I believe the city can settle without our approval.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing further.
Okay. Alderman Irvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the conversation that Chairman Taliaferro has raised really brings to light why we need as a council to get a little more involved in these cases on the onset and not, deal with what we're dealing with now, where we have one member with a difference of opinion. And quite frankly, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know, which way to go in this type of a manner. So I would hope that this committee will look at the, setting forth some parameters around this. We do have a resolution pending in rules around risk management and litigation that I think would bring a lot more clarity to us as a council and involve us much earlier in the process with this. And it will allow us to weigh in just as Chairman Taliaferro has weighed in and, offer some back and forth on these issues, because this style of take it or leave it really puts our law department in a precarious situation, puts everybody in an awkward situation when we do not necessarily accept the recommendation of counsel with these types of settlements. Number one. Number two, and I have a slightly different take on what Chairman Taliaferro stated, in light of the experience that some of these individuals have gone through. He believes that the 175 is too high. I may believe that the 175 is too low. And we need to have some clarity and understanding of what these types of cases settle for. And again, we have the ability to do this in closed session and not do it as publicly as we have to do right now. So those are the types of things I really think would be very helpful to us as a council, and hopefully help solve some of the challenges that we face from a risk management perspective with the issues that the city of Chicago is facing. So I'm not sure how we're going to dispose of this particular case, but I would like to hear additional conversation from Corporation Counsel and other members of the committee to land at some conclusion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. Following up on what Alderman Irvin alluded to, it's my recollection, and some of the members may recall, we had a long and painful negotiation with the federal government in the case of Detective Joe Earhart, who fortunately passed away as a result of his injuries in the year 2008. Joe Earhart, at the time of his injury, was assigned to the FBI Terrorist Task Force. And it's my recollection that when these Chicago police officers are assigned to a federal task force, there is an agreement between the city of Chicago and the federal government that outlines what the responsibility of the federal government is in relationship to these incidents. I don't recall what the Corporation Counsel indicated the agency was, but if it is the FBI Terrorist Task Force or the DEA Task Force, all these officers are also then deputized as federal agents. So it would seem to me that what Alderman Irvin or Alderman Taliaferro alluded to might indeed be the case here. And of course, I alluded to Detective Earhart's unfortunate demise because the federal government absorbed much of the cost for his care as a result of his injuries back then. But there's also, I note in the annual appropriation ordinance on page 165, an amount of $82,558,000 appropriated for payment of tort and non-tort judgments, outside counsel expenses, and expert costs as approved by the Corporation Council. It doesn't say anything about approval of the City Council. So that amount is up from the 2019 expenditure of $63,950,000 by a considerable amount. So is it the position of the law department that this expenditure is to be taken from that line item and doesn't require the approval of the council, since it says only on the approval of the Corporation Council?
Chairman, Jeff Levine, Law Department. Could you state again where in the budget you're drawing that line item from?
Page 165. It's 0900 financial purposes as specified. 0931 for payment of tort and non-tort judgments, outside counsel expenses, and expert costs as approved by the Corporation Council.
Yes.
So is it the position of the law department that it would only apply to those payments of judgments, not settlements? Is that why it's here?
I think, Chairman, I haven't had an opportunity to evaluate what specifically that line item pertains to, but it sounds to me like that is referring to the source of funding for those situations where the settlements are under 100,000, or they are judgments, which obviously the court has jurisdiction over, such that those would not come before the city council for approval. In this case, the settlement authority being asked for is 175,000, and thus that is the reason it is being brought before the committee for approval. And as always, when the law department brings these settlements before the finance committee, we are doing so because we believe that the city's fiscal responsibilities are best met by this settlement, because it represents an outcome that is going to cost the city less than if the matter were to proceed forward.
I would tend to agree with that, and as indicated by the earlier witness, it's the position of the law department. If it goes to trial, the decision of the jury could be that it would cost far more. But when I believe either Alderman Talaferro or Alderman Urban brings up this question about sharing the cost with the task force, I didn't realize until the testimony today that this was a task force arrest warrant. And given the case of Detective Earhart, it seems in the past that the federal government in these task force cases where there is an agreement with the city sets out the responsibility of the federal government to hold harmless the city for these expenses. I don't know if that's the case here, but it could be that there is this example of the Earhart case. So for what it's worth, it has happened in the past that the federal government has shared in the cost of these similar incidents.
Yes, that's a very helpful point. I think in light of the fact that this was, to my recollection, a jointly sought and jointly executed operation, I think that in these cases, the city attorney's always take pains to try to seek recovery from other sources to the degree that is at all feasible. And we are looking to see if there was an agreement in place here. But I am confident that if there was an opportunity here for us to get some level of contribution from a participating agency, that we would have availed ourselves of that. And your point regarding the fiscal prudence is well taken, because my understanding is that if the case were to move forward, plaintiffs' counsel fees alone, we are estimating, would likely be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. So when viewed in light of that, $175,000 seems to be a fiscally sensible course of action. And I say that with due deference to Chairman Taliaferro's point, which is one I absolutely agree with, which is that we absolutely don't want to be incentivizing plaintiffs' lawyers to be going after the city as an easy target, and I truly don't think that's the case. I think that we take plenty of cases to trial, and we have a good record, and I think we only bring the cases here that we think are going to represent a better financial outcome.
Chairman,
Alderman
point of
Burke.
information, Alderman Taliaferro.
Yes.
Yeah, just as a point of information for Jeff, I'm assuming this is a contingency cases where counsel for the plaintiff is his fees would be compensated by any judgment or any settlement that's awarded to the plaintiff, and not paid separately by the city of Chicago. Is that the case here?
If you're asking, does the $175,000 represent everything that the city is liable for? The answer is yes. And I think that while we are not privy to the arrangement between plaintiffs and their counsel, I think it is a reasonable assumption that it would be a contingency fee arrangement as opposed to an hourly, a fee-based arrangement.
So in essence, his fees can run up to $600,000-$700,000. Irregardless, he's only going to get a percentage of what we settle this case for. So, in my opinion, that would not even hold any weight as to whether or not we should settle for less. If he continues to run up his fees, that's essentially on him.
If he loses, that's absolutely right. And I think the aspect that I think we are focusing on is that it's a risk assessment, and there is the possibility of an adverse finding in light of the facts as Renee has presented them, and those are fundamentally it's not terrific facts, and so we are seeking approval for the 175 because we don't think it outside the realm of possibility that plaintiffs could prevail if the litigation were to move forward.
Point of information.
Yes, Alderman Moore.
Along that line of questioning, so if the plaintiff was to prevail, even at a lower settlement, are you saying that we would still have to possibly pay the attorney's fees? That's what I want to be clear on. Is that a definite or possibility?
Well, if let's see, I'm trying to reconfirm that this is a federal. Yes, this is a federal case, and therefore attorney's fees can be included in the award. And so what that means is regardless of how much in damages the plaintiffs were awarded, that their attorney's fees would be layered on top of that. And so we would be very likely well over 175,000, even if a jury were to conclude that plaintiff's actual damages were not significant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman. Alderman Sposato? You're on mute. Nick, you're on mute there.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Ms. Rodney. Always a pleasure to see you. Once again, congratulations. You look awesome. You got that nice glow to you. So, good to see you. So, and I say that with all sincerity. So, Ms. Rodney, is there anybody here from COPA or CPD? I didn't see them on anywhere.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. I just had some questions, or they're actually questions I know the answer to.
I don't have Kevin on. Kevin Graham was not on this call, Alderman.
Yeah, but O'Connor.
Connor.
All right, no problem. I just wanted to bring up some point for some clarification for everybody. I know these bad search warrants are bothersome to everybody, but we are getting better at it. At least it appears to be. And I'm just going to give you the last 2 years stats. So we served 1395 search warrants in 2019, and 121 of them resulted with nothing. In other words, they would have been bad. They had the wrong house, whatever, which was 9%. And then oddly enough, last year, which this number doesn't seem right to me, but it's only through December 10th, we had 496 search warrants that we served, and 32 of them had no results at 6%. So, we recovered a lot of property. We had a lot of arrests. We recovered guns. So I just want everybody to know that every once in a while we do screw up, and it does happen. But I agree with my colleague, Alderman Talaferro, and I disagree with them that 175 is too much, but on the other hand, it's not enough. So if you got two people suffering from PTSD and 175 is enough of a settlement, that makes no sense to me. 0 cents. So I also don't want to open the floodgates for people thinking they can sue us for these mistakes we make. Yes, absolutely, positively deserve something. The damage to the doors, the inconvenience, whatever it may be, 25, 50,000 possibly, but 175 seems a bit too much to me, and I cannot support this, and I will not be supporting this. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Ms. Rodney. Good to see you.
Thanks, Alderman. Jeff, going back to some of the information that we shared last week. So they initially demanded $850,000, or Renee, if you want to answer this too. And we countered at 20,000.
I believe that's correct, yes.
So there was a settlement conference with the court, and the court said, here's where we're going to get to through a sort of a negotiated discussion.
I believe the court was urging the parties to land at 175.
So coming down from 850 and then coming up from our initial $20,000. And the 20 would have been less than the actual medical bills to this date that they claim that they have.
Yes.
Okay.
Chairman, point of information.
Yes, Alderman.
It is not uncommon in my 10 years as an alderman for getting ridiculous requests from these people. So they ask $800,000 and settling for 175, or to ask for $3 million and to settle for 300,000. So they could ask for whatever they want. They could ask ridiculous numbers. They could sue for the stars, and hoping to get something. It's just a point of information to say, I could care less what they ask for. I mean, they could ask for any ridiculous amount they want, so.
Yeah, I think my point is not about how much they're asking for, and it never has been. It's about the court sitting people down and saying, here's what we're going to get to in a negotiated settlement. And we want you to come out of this situation with an amount that's appropriate for both parties. And we did send that out last week to everybody just to give them a little bit information about where the law department settled on this particular issue. Alderman Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. And I understand this is a case because there will be other cases similar to this coming forward in the concern for the right amount, what the settlement needs, circumstance different. What was the estimated, I can't remember, but Jeff, did he say, Jeff, is it $300,000 what your estimated cost to litigate this would be?
I believe I was referring to what we estimated that plaintiff's counsel would be seeking. That's not additional costs from the city standpoint.
So that's if it goes to trial and there's a judgment, then on top of the award, counsel would be seeking legal fees.
Plaintiff's counsel would be seeking legal fees, and city counsel would have incurred additional fees as well.
And so what is so our risk reward here is the 175. What is our estimated legal cost, even if it's in-house hours or however we do? Are we using in or out?
Well, we're using in-house counsel. We estimate 300 to 400 cumulative hours. Our pay scale obviously differs from the private sector.
Yeah, it's $1 below. We're in violation, I think, of the minimum wage.
I think. Well, thank you for that vote of confidence. Yeah. But I think, ultimately, what we're talking about here is an amount that is substantially less than what it would be if it moves forward and we don't win. And I suppose if
their ask was $850.
If we move forward and win, then we still have the additional cost built in of 300 to 400 hours of city attorney time.
Right, but we will have had a case that could potentially deter other cases from being brought. Not saying that the merits, I'm not talking about the merits of this, but just in practical approach of suing the city. As asked, you could ask for $850 and you're expecting to get $175,000. That's a win. I don't know how much time was spent. So I think there's, at times we need to stop and litigate just for other reasons. So
sure.
Their ask was $850, and so.
But again, here we would be litigating based on.
You're frozen on my screen.
Sorry, can others hear?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the fundamental point here is that we would be litigating on a factual record that is not favorable to the city here.
I understand that. Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to get the estimated cost. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Smith and then Alderman Urban.
Thank you. So I want to, first of all, I want to thank everyone for their questions, and Alderman Thompson's questions anticipated some of mine, so I'll be shorter. But Ms. Rodney, is there an agreed period of time in which the police officers were in this this couple's home?
Yes. Well, approximately 5 minutes before they realized they were in the wrong apartment. And then a sergeant arrived approximately 45 minutes later to explain the mistake to the family.
Well, I'm certainly glad that happened, because we right now have a potential other case out there that could be far more damaging and would be very damaging if this, as another act of some kind, if it could get the evidence, if this case were to go to trial. I mean, I'm now just talking as an old, like Alderman Thompson and others in this room, an old trial lawyer who sometimes have to settle cases. And I gotta tell you, I think this is fair. It's just fair. When a judge comes across and you're settling the case for less than the amount of attorney's fees that are in there, yes, and the reason they're accepting it is because it was 5 minutes and I'm assuming nobody got hurt. And I don't know what time of the day it was. On the other hand, a jury could decide to say, well, there's a lot of liability because you didn't check the door number. Now, whether or not we agree with that, whether or not it would be found to be reasonable conduct by the police, is something that would have to be litigated. And I got to tell you, I'm just saying, it's our fiduciary duty to try to minimize the city's risk while our risk officer and others get the city's act together on how we behave in a way to manage risk. Because we're not managing, and we haven't been for decades and decades and decades. So sometimes you just gotta bite the bullet and make the settlement, especially when it's less than your cost of litigation. So the only invitation that I see here is that somehow somebody on city council is going to invite someone to roll the dice, and when that jury verdict comes back a lot larger, who are we going to be looking at? So I understand the questions, and I think they're very valid, and I also think that the city's law department needs to be prepared to answer these questions when you come to council. Every one of them, because we do have a fiduciary duty to review. We do have a fiduciary duty to review these settlements to see if they're in the financial self-interest. So I have to say, I'm a little disappointed when we are not fully prepared to answer these questions at these briefings. At these city council meetings. The public is entitled to know that our city's law department can fully answer every question. So having said that, having now heard all the facts come eking out here, I do think that this is a fair settlement. And if this was my client, I'd say, and the city is in a way, I would say do it. And if the plaintiff is ready to end their hassle of being in a lawsuit, then we should settle this. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my view.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Urban?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Napolitano. You ready?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. Is there any way we can hold on to this just a little bit longer? Because I think Chairman Teleferro brings up a good point. Just on my behalf, I'd like to know who actually wrote this warrant. I think that's kind of the question he's getting at. Not who participated in it, because you can have multiple parties participating in it, but who is the actual, who collected the information on this warrant, who wrote the warrant. The judge is not really applicable because it's just, that's the person you go in front of that have it signed. But who is the actual agency that wrote this warrant? And can all parties that were involved in that be held accountable before we settle this. I think that is the fair way for the city to go about that, because we're running joint efforts with multiple organizations. I get the concept of a warrant to get drugs and guns off the street, but how they affect people is important as well, that are mistaken or hit the wrong doors. So is it possible before we even vote on that we can get this information to us? Just a general question on that.
Well, I'm going to give it back to Jeff, but we're still liable no matter what here. I mean, regardless of whether somebody else was jointly liable, we're still going to be held liable. I mean, that was the settlement conference that the judge sat everybody down with and said, stipulated to the city's liability on the Fourth Amendment violations. Okay. But let me hear from Alderman Taliaferro first and hold that thought.
On that point, though, does liability with us being liable on it is totally understandable, but are we the only ones liable on that? Or is there
understand that.
Is there any other cases being held and anyone else being held liable? Because if that's the case, we should not be serving any more warrants with joint groups at all. If that's the case, if we're the only ones that are liable because we're the workforce behind this, and we shouldn't be serving warrants with anybody.
Chairman Wagasback, can I jump in?
Yes.
Have a piece of information that I think might answer one of Chairman Taliaferro's earlier questions about joint liability, and Alderman Napolitano's similar question as well. So CPD does have task force agreements with its federal law enforcement partners, but as I understand it from CPD, those agreements don't contain indemnification where that federal law enforcement partner would agree to hold harmless CPD if they committed some tort or were later found liable of some type of conduct while executing a warrant. So we don't have that type of agreement with our federal law enforcement partners. And while there was at least one FBI agent who participated in the execution of the warrant, as I understand it, the person who made the decision to breach the door was a CPD officer who was named in the lawsuit, and I believe was disciplined or recommended for discipline by COPA. So to the extent that answers the committee's questions about joint liability with other federal law enforcement partners, that is ultimately something a jury could decide. I mean, that federal law enforcement officer wasn't served in this case, so he's not a part of the case to date. But we don't have an agreement where we would be absolved of liability in the event of a lawsuit in this instance.
Okay, Renee, hold that thought. Alderman Napolitano, did that answer part of your question?
Yeah, I think it answered it, yes, clearly too, perfectly. I think where I'm held up on is the mistake in between, did an outside party write this search warrant and ask the city of Chicago to serve it because of the manpower that we have? That's my big question. Did Tom Smith, who works for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, write this warrant, do all the research on it, have it act as the affiant with a CI and go in front of a judge and have it signed, hand it over to a Chicago police district and say, can you serve this warrant as the workforce, and we will be there to kind of come in and look at what was, if there's an offender and anything obtained. That's my big hang up. Are we serving warrants for other departments, and then we're forced, rightfully so, forced with the mistakes were made, is anyone else held accountable for it as well? That's my question.
Alderman, in this instance, I think CPD was an active task force participant as opposed to simply carrying out duties at the behest of our federal partner.
I'm sorry, I'll finish with this. Participant, we know because they were there. Did they write the warrant? Did a Chicago police officer write the warrant? I'm sorry, Jeff, that, I apologize if I didn't phrase that correctly.
That's okay. No, the actual warrant gets issued by the judge after the parties who are seeking the warrant go in front of the judge and say, here's the evidence we have. We would like you to issue a warrant so that we can go and arrest these people. Once the judge issues the warrant, then CPD goes back and prepares a packet of information for the involved officers who are actually going to go enforce the warrant. They then take that packet of information and go out and execute on the warrant.
I got you. So, and I apologize because when I wrote or served warrants, I would collect all the data. I would write the warrants exactly on how it was going to be served and who the offender was, what the location was. I submitted it to a state's attorney. State's attorney made corrections and told me if it was a warrant that held a probable cause, then I myself would take that warrant, my CI, to a judge and swear that CI and the warrant in front of the judge. So me as a Chicago police officer wrote that warrant. The judge approved it. Then I went back and found all the associated officers that would help serve the warrant. My only question is, who is the person that collected the information on this warrant and wrote it? That's my only question. I don't want to know who served it, because serving it was the police and FBI and who else. Who actually wrote the warrant? That's what I'd like to know.
We can try to
Thanks.
find it out.
Yeah, thanks, Alderman. I don't, and just in my opinion, I don't think it would be relevant to the judge deciding, here we're going to sit down and you're going to have a settlement conference. But I think we'll see if we can get them to find that information.
Okay.
Let me go over to Alderman Taliaferro first. But Renee, if you have a response, that's fine.
Impartial answer to that.
Thanks, Anthony.
As I understand it, the defendant CPD officers were not involved in the underlying investigation into the target. But the arrest warrant described the address to be searched and the address where the person to be arrested was to be found, along with his driver's license number and the charges. So, and it also included a photograph of the person. So that's the information CPD had with them when they went to execute the arrest warrant.
Alderman Taliaferro. Chris, you're unmuted. Alderman Taliaferro. Okay. All right. Renee, on this, again, with the issue of the COPA sustaining violations, my question was, were all officers held to account here? And did that play into the settlement conference with the amount that was requested, where officers were found in violation of Fourth Amendment rights?
Yes, COPA's findings that they had violated this family's Fourth Amendment rights forecast what a jury would find. So that was definitely a fact in the plaintiff's favor as far as negotiating the settlement outcome.
And that information is basically stipulated to, in not only the settlement conference, but if there were go to a jury trial.
Right. There's a Monell allegation as part of this lawsuit, which means that it charges the city with having a pattern and practice of failure to train and certain things that would look beyond just the individual officer's conduct. So whereas certain background information might ordinarily be kept out of a trial, in a Monell type of trial, information such as COPA's findings could potentially come in. I mean, there are certain strategies we would take to keep out information because we thought it would confuse the jury or was irrelevant, but it's possible that kind of information might be available to a jury. But that aside, it's a fairly clear argument to make that you don't have the right to go into the wrong home to search someone when it's evident that that person doesn't live there.
Okay. Notwithstanding, I think the good arguments that some of the aldermen have made here, I think we will have a vote on it. And I ask Alderman Smith if you could make a motion to pass.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Roll
I
call,
make a
please.
motion to pass this on the same roll call as was used to determine quorum.
Thank you, but I think I did hear a roll call.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I will take roll on this. Alderman, if you could be prepared to unmute yourself as I go through the roll call. And I will, now, again, this is item 1A of the supplemental. This is the Franklin case. So with that, let me start with Alderman Hopkins.
Alderman Hopkins votes aye.
Alderman Dowell,
Aye.
Alderman King, Alderman Hairston,
Aye.
Alderman Sawyer,
Aye.
Alderman Mitchell, Alderman Harris,
Aye.
Alderman Beal,
Yep.
Alderman Sadlowski Garza,
Aye.
Alderman Thompson,
Aye.
Alderman Cardenas, Alderman Quinn,
Aye.
Alderman Burke,
Aye.
Alderman Lopez,
No.
okay. Alderman Moore,
Aye.
Alderman Curtis. I think that was Alderman O'Shea. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins.
Aye.
Alderman Tabaris.
Aye.
Alderman Scott. Alderman Burnett.
Aye.
Alderman Irvin. Alderman Taliaferro.
Nay on this one, Chairman.
Okay. Alderman Boris.
Irvin votes aye.
Okay. Alderman Boris.
No.
Okay. Chairman votes aye. Alderman Austin. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Sposato.
Next, Posado is no.
Okay. Alderman Napolitano.
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Riley.
No.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
Alderman Tunney.
Aye.
Alderman Osterman.
Aye.
Alderman Silverstein.
Aye.
This item passes with 21 aye votes and 6 no votes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And Jeff and Renee, I think in our next set of briefings, I know you provided a lot of this information in those. We can dig a little bit deeper next time, I think, and look for some of the answers that some of these aldermen have. I know some of them are more broad about some of the policing issues, but we can try to dig down on the particulars for each one of these if in the future. Thank you very much. And let's move on to item 1B. This would be Anderson versus City of Chicago in the amount of $400,000.
Thank you. This second settlement stems from a lawsuit brought by Pamela Anderson after a CPD officer fatally shot her son, James Anderson, in his home in September of 2015. The case was previously tried in state court in August 2019. The 3-week trial resulted in a mistrial following approximately 2 days of jury deliberation after one of the jurors conducted her own research on the definition of willful and wanton conduct. The law department proposes settling this case for $400,000, which includes attorney's fees and costs, as a cost-effective measure to limit the city's financial exposure. 4 CPD officers responded to a radio dispatch regarding a mentally ill man who was threatening his mother with a knife. She explained that her son had a history of mental issues, as she described them, and he usually carried a knife. She asked the officers to help take him to the hospital. The mother directed the officers to her son's bedroom in the back of the home, off of the kitchen. One of the officers stood across from the son's bedroom door with his taser out. The other officer stood to the right of the bedroom door, knocked and stated, "Hey, James, it's the police." James responded for the officer to come in. When the officer opened the door, James was standing right there, 4 arms forward and a box cutter in each fist. He quickly came out of the room. As the officer backed up to create space, James turned toward him and continued to advance. At this time, the other officer attempted to deploy his taser to no apparent effect. Within a few steps, the shooting officer had backed into a shelving unit in the kitchen and had ordered James to drop it at least twice. James advanced to within arm's length of the officer, who unholstered his firearm and fired 5 shots. The entire interaction between James and the officer lasted less than 5 seconds. James fell to the floor, still holding a box cutter in each hand. EMS was called and James passed away soon after. COPA investigated the shooting and concluded the officer's use of force was objectively reasonable and complied with the department policy and applicable law. While the law department believes this is a strong case, there are some aspects which expose the city to liability. The biggest vulnerability is if the trial judge allows plaintiff to argue that the shooting officer's conduct unnecessarily put him in a position requiring the use of deadly force. Plaintiff's expert will opine that the officer's pre-shooting conduct failed to comply with CPT general orders and caused the deadly force incident. In particular, plaintiff will seek to exploit the officer's decision not to call a sergeant to the scene prior to entering the home, not to call someone trained in crisis intervention, and not attempt to speak to James through the door to assess his mental state, rather than opening the door and engaging him in a confined space without knowing how dangerous or violent he was. The previous trial judge allowed this evidence, which caused juror confusion and led to the mistrial. In addition, the 2020 changes to Illinois law removing the safety net of a special interrogatory may make it likely that jurors in a retrial will answer a special interrogatory in a way that supports a verdict for the plaintiff. Plaintiff request for damages at trial was $13 million. The proposed settlement of $400,000, which includes attorney's fees and costs, is a cost-effective measure to limit the city's financial exposure, especially when considering that a second trial would dramatically increase costs for both sides. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Alderman Brookins. Is that you? Yes.
I do have a question. So, Attorney Rodney, was this matter caught on video?
Was it caught on video? No. There were no body-worn cameras worn at the time. This predated CPD's rollout of that technology. There was no other footage of the incident either.
And so if COPA's saying that this was justified, why are we settling this?
Based on the expense of trying the case a second time, which includes not only our in-house attorney's time, but at least $50,000 in expert witness fees, an increase in plaintiff's counsel fees, which could increase any future settlement demand. And also what we anticipate plaintiff's expert will opine about the officer putting himself in a situation that required deadly force, which a second jury could look at and decide that contributed to the city's liability in this case.
All right, thank you.
Make a motion to move to pass, Alderman David Moore.
Yes, sir. I was just going to see if you had a question, but motion to pass by Alderman David Moore. All those in favor for approval by the same roll call used to establish quorum, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those
Mr. Posada's
opposed?
a no.
Okay, with the exception
Chairman Wagasback, can you record Alderman Taliaferro as a no vote on this one as well?
No vote, Chairman.
Alderman Curtis, no vote also.
Thompson's a no.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Wasn't me this
Yeah.
time, Chairman.
Can somebody that's got the video going in the background just mute for a second? I'm going to do a roll call. Thank you. So we are on item 1B, and Alderman Hopkins,
I vote aye.
Alderman Dowell,
Aye.
Alderman King, Alderman Hairston,
Aye.
Alderman Sawyer.
Hold on.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Mitchell, Alderman Harris,
Aye.
Alderman Beal, Alderman Beal. Okay. Alderman Sadlowski Garza.
Aye.
Alderman Thompson is a no. Correct. Alderman Cardenas. Alderman Quinn.
No.
Alderman Burke. Alderman Lopez.
Did you get me? No.
Alderman Burke, you're a no?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Alderman Raymond Lopez. Alderman Moore. Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Curtis. No. Alderman O'Shea. Alderman Brookins.
No.
Alderman Tabaris.
No. Chairman Wagasback.
Yes.
I'd like the record to reflect also no on the other item, the other settlement as well. On both settlements.
All right, let me come back to that, Alderman Tabaris. Alderman Scott. Alderman Burnett.
Yes.
Alderman Irvin.
Alderman Irvin votes aye.
Alderman Taliaferro, you said no?
Nay.
Alderman Raboris, you said no?
No.
Okay. Chairman Wagspex, yes. Alderman Austin.
Aye.
Alderman Villegas. Alderman Mitz. Alderman Sposato.
Nick Sposato's a no.
Alderman Napolitano.
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Alderman Riley.
No.
Alderman Smith.
Aye.
Alderman Tunney.
Aye.
Alderman Osterman. And Alderman Silverstein.
Chairman, this is Alderman Lopez. Was I recorded as a no? Couldn't tell.
I think so. I had you as a no.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, ladies and
Chairman,
gentlemen.
this is Alderman O'Shea. Please
Yes.
record me as a no. I apologize. I had to step off for a minute.
Oh, it's a tie.
Alderman Wagsback, Osterman's a yes.
Thank you. All right, we have final tally 14 to 13. The item 1B passes 14 to 13.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Alderman Austin?
Alderman Austin, would you record me as voting aye on the first item?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And Tabaris was a no. Give me 1 second there. Go back. 22. Okay.
Chairman, did you record yourself on the second?
Yes, as a yes. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the item passes And that concludes the supplemental agenda. Really have to say I really appreciate the robust discussion, and everybody should vote their conscience there and what they feel is appropriate. So I do thank the law department for coming in and explaining in detail what these cases are about. But I also just want to note that we have no further business today and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Chairman. Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Lopez has a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nick, was that a no?
No, I to adjourn.
Yes, for a roll
Okay.
call.
No, that was an aye.
All right. Hearing no objection, so ordered. This concludes the Committee on Finance meeting.